our waiting room. So you don't have to worry about it. Cool. Alrighty. Free to start whenever you'd like.
Thank you, ma'am.
You're so welcome. You've got a few minutes though. Hi.
Big crowd here today.
Yeah, you guys can move on up if you want.
You probably will.
Yeah.
Stay there a minute. I'm sorry.
You're fine, you're fine.
Here's a copy for you. Here's a copy for you.
Thank
You already have
Oh,
one.
yay,
And
awesome.
here's a copy for you.
I don't know.
And then here's some extras. I've got like 3 more. Sorry.
Mine's already marked.
You,
I'll bring you more if you need them. We printed out a bunch of stapling them.
Happy.
Yes.
She's normally here on Tuesdays, but she's has a sinus infection.
Oh, no, those are nasty.
Oh God, she feels awful. I had it last week, but it wasn't really a sinus infection. It was just, I don't know what it was.
Ugh. Did she get those sinus headaches too?
But she hardly ever gets a sinus infection, but
Yeah.
oh, she has a migraine. I wonder what it is. And she works Tuesday, Thursday, Friday.
Nice. So if I have a property I'm selling, unless it were the MLS, would I still use this one?
Yeah, you still need to know that.
hey,
Okay.
tell the Kohler pumps down here.
And then somewhere on here, I've never sold one myself, but there's a section that you have to fill out.
Are we ready?
to Indicate your relationship, personal interest disclosure.
Got it, got it, got it.
I'm ready. Steve,
Ready?
here in a minute.
Ready?
Ready?
We got an admin and experienced agent and semi-experienced.
Oh, no, very green.
You've been to 2 of these trainings, haven't you?
Yeah, yeah.
Contract class?
Yeah.
So not gonna be completely.
But I mean, I haven't filled out, but it looks like, so I have a property to sell. This is probably what I have to fill out for me to sell my property, no? Is it differently?
Are you, no, you'll need an employment, exclusive right to sell, employment agreement.
I'm sorry, I told.
Oh, okay, okay,
Don's class on Thursday.
huh?
Don's class.
Okay,
on
got it,
Thursday is,
okay.
is on listings, I'm pretty sure.
I have an appointment maybe with Shauna Friday afternoon to knock it out.
Okay. Yeah, put your own personal home, certainly.
Yeah.
Tommy showed up.
Yeah.
You know what? I don't wanna sit back. and put them on.
Well, it's a rental and it just,
I'll sit over
it
here.
just hit me. I saw like the year to date, like for September, for October. And my net was like 8,600. And I went, I'm out 800 a month and this is month 10.
You're out 800 a month.
Yeah, I'm like, I netted 600 this year.
Why would you be out?
But I still have, they don't cover all the expenses. I still have
Well, that's,
COA, POA, insurance, utilities.
you don't have it rented high enough,
Right, right.
for sure. I mean, if you're not being, you're not. it's not
But I mean,
covered.
I'm living paycheck to paycheck, so it's like, it would be nice to have that money in the bank.
Gotcha.
There's a lot more things I can do with that.
Okay. So we're gonna cover the sales contract, but we'll cover it fairly quickly. You've been here twice. You're brand new, but it's okay. Because these guys have done bunches of them. And so they will help us because they'll have questions, I'm sure, at some point that they want specifically answered, and I'll try to answer. Typically, when we start the classes, we talk about what your real job is. And we talk about it in every meeting with Keller Williams, which is your real job is lead generation. Maybe not as an admin, but you're gonna have to help some. You know, you've got a sphere of influence, I'm sure, that's fairly sizable. But that's really where it starts, because you can't do a contract unless you have a lead, you know? It doesn't matter what you do. So when you get up in the morning, you think, okay, what's my job today? Not documents necessarily, it's try to find a new lead. And the deal is, and everybody misses this, is that they think they've got to have all these leads. You know, you gotta have 50 leads, you know, so you can get through this, and that's the only way you'll ever make it. You really need 1 lead a week. Either a buyer or a seller, and if you actually were able to complete that, then you do 52 transactions a year, and that's about 10 million at 200,000 a pop, which is the average basically. So you have to change your mindset a little bit and understand that you're not looking for 50 leads or 100 leads. I got to put a billboard up and minute 10,000 flyers and all of this. It's really, let me find 1 lead, and you know, church, grocery store, social events, you know, coffee clutch, whatever you want to call those things. But there's a lot of opportunities for open houses are still the best place if you're any good at it. I'm not. Any good at it?
I've had pretty limited success.
Limited is the way I would describe it too. I mean, some people are good at it. I feel like I'm great at it because I think I make good presentations and all that, but I suck. I really do. I mean, it's just I do a bad job. I haven't been able to convert a lot of people.
I have.
But some people like Paulina can go to an open house and sell it that day. My wife, I mean, she used to go to the open houses occasionally. She never did want to, but she would sell the house and get 2 listings. You know, I can't get her to go do one. If I could, I think we'd just be rolling in it, you know? But you've got to find sources for that. Open house is good, number 1 also, because you get to talk about the language of real estate. You know, you actually get to talk about numbers and talk about the neighborhood and the specifics of the house. And that's a lot of it, a lot of skill that goes into that. And I can do all that, but I'm not very successful with it. Successful one-on-one with clients, but I just can't seem to do the open houses. I think some people have that natural, maybe I create a fear in people.
Are you talking about selling the house that you're holding open or just finding buyers?
Yeah, finding buyers.
Yeah.
I've just always been bad at that too. I've picked up over the years, you know. Now 27 years, I've probably picked up 10 or 15 total. And I've done 1 or 2 this year. I don't do hundreds. Here, come sit over here. I don't want you to get too far away from me.
Okay.
I don't know who it was recently at a open house thing said that you're not there to sell that house.
You're not there to sell that house.
You're there to get leads, but I have had so few people show up.
Yeah, but again, how many do you need to show up?
Yeah, one good one.
One,
That's all you need, really. And I think people miss that thing. You know, they want to have a busy open house. If you've ever been to a busy open house, which you may not have, it's miserable. There's people running all over the damn place and you don't get to have a conversation. You really can't establish any trust, you know, which is the first thing we have to do. So anyhow, that's one good source. Obviously, I think cold calling is a horrible source, but people do it. But I think sphere of influence callings is a good source. And a good example this morning at the team meeting, which she called, and she was inviting them to an event that she got to have a conversation. I guarantee you, there's an old thing from training with Floyd Wickman 1,000 years ago, which is called Ford. You call somebody in your sphere of influence, you talk about family, occupation, relationships, and dreams. You don't have to talk about real estate, because guess what they're gonna do? They're gonna talk about real estate, yeah. Say, how the kids doing? You know, I saw that Jody, you know, made the baseball team or, you know, is playing soccer now or whatever. They're like, oh, yeah. I mean, they'll talk for 5 minutes and then you ask them about, well, how's your job? I know you were talking about, you know, you might change, you know, next thing you know, they're going, hey, you know, the house is getting really too small. Oh, yeah. But just remember that. I mean, I want people to understand that that's the primary job of a real estate agent is not how to fill out a damn contract, because you can fill out a contract. I mean, we can teach it in an hour and a half or 2 hours or whatever, but it's really about generating opportunities to fill out a contract. And that's the hardest part. Okay, so we started the contracts. We'll act like some of you don't know what you're doing. But on the buyer, you'll notice here, it's Jesus and Amber. I'm guessing Jesus, probably not Jesus. We're guessing they're husband and wife. If you wanted to make sure that the title company knew that, you can just add HW there. And that tells the title company they are married, because for the last 27 years, I've had David Jones and Susie Phillips buy houses. We don't know whether they're married, what the relationship is or anything like that. Now, I would know probably, but if you're trying to communicate that, you could add husband and wife, or we can all buy houses individually. That's one thing we can do. It takes one in Missouri to buy, but two to sell if you're married. But James L. Bolin could buy one, but it'd probably be a good idea to put AMP, which is a married person. And then they know my wife's there, and if there is a loan, she's gonna have to go to closing. If it's cash, they may still want her to go to closing. They may want her to sign the deed. This doesn't have to be a person, though. It can be an entity. It can be a trust. It could be an LLC, any of those things. So if it was me, it'd be Kelby Lane Inc. as the buyer. The only thing to remember is, and I get this question constantly, which is really odd, is that somebody with blood has to sign as the buyer. It can't be an entity. They could be representing the entity. In other words, you sign James L. Bolin underneath Kelby Lane Inc. But it has to be a real person that signs it. We get this all the time, especially with investors. They don't want to sign for some reason. They just want to sign the investment company, you know, the blue flippers, you know, or whatever. You can't do that. It has to be a live person. If it is a trust or an LLC or any other entity like that, you're going to be required to have documents for the title company. So you might as well ask for them up front when they say, hey, I'm going to buy this in my LLC or my corporation or my trust name. You know, okay, while we're talking about it then, let's just go ahead and make sure that you've got a copy of those documents, because the title company will want to see in there, there's a, you know, it's on within the first couple of pages and the last few pages of a trust or a corporate document that says you have the right to sell real estate through this organization, through this entity. Really important. Just tell them up front. And then that way, we're not 42 days into the contract, closing in 3 days, and say, I need a copy of your trust. God, I know where that's at. We did that in 1968. You know, so you want to get that up front. Okay?
And if it's an LLC, you need the articles of
Incorporation.
incorporation.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep, exactly. And then on the property itself, seller agrees to sell and buyer agrees to buy. we used to have a buyer and a seller name on there, and the attorneys took the buyer's name out, or the seller's name out, because they're saying, look, what you're selling is property. And so we'll just put them on page A. Never made any sense to me, but you don't identify them until later. But we are selling this real estate located in the municipality of, and the blue company over here, they want you to put the city name if it applies. If it's a country property, you can probably get away with it. But if it's in Willard, they want Willard here. They'll probably send it back to you through compliance. If it's Springfield, they'll want Springfield in there. Okay? So even though it's not if it's incorporated, it doesn't matter to them. And I think Remax is the same way, so. We've got the full address here, and make sure that you know the address is correct. If it's circle or square or whatever it is, you've got to have that, especially on a government loan, because they can kick it out at the end. In this case, we've just got the full address, 7431 North Farm Road 91, Willard. Zip code and the county is really important here. We don't typically add legal descriptions because we don't have them. But if you do have a survey available, then you should include it. Or if you have a meets and bounds description of the property, you should include it. And it should be initialed by all parties. Okay? Because that shows everybody, including the title company, this is what we're buying. And the title company will start from that meets and bounds direction or that survey to do their title work. Now, in this case, it was 13 acres. We didn't have a survey. They didn't ask for one. It had been sold before, twice over since it was built. So the title company said, we're good. They just used the CRS or the legal description that was attached the first time. Now, property includes but not limited to all the following, if any. These are things that you typically find in a house, which are now located in the real estate, all of which seller warrants to convey to buyer free and clear at closing. Let's just skip right down here to solar panels. If you see solar panels, you better start asking questions. Most of the time, somebody recently sold a house, it was $165,000. We're trying to sell a house for $165,000, had solar panels, and said, well, what do I do about the fact that he still owes $35,000 on the solar panels? And I said, was he gonna pay him off at closing? No, he can't afford to. I said, was the loan assumable? And he said, well, I'll have to check on that. But those are questions you're gonna have to ask, because maybe I can afford a $165,000 house, but I can't afford a $200,000 house. So if I'm gonna have to roll the solar panels into a loan of some type, whether it's personal or not, separate from my mortgage, my debt to income will probably gonna be bad. I won't be able to buy it. I mean, this is gonna be a disaster we're gonna fight with for the next 15 or 20 years. So if you see solar panels, or they say they've got solar panels, that's the first question. Are they paid for? You know, is that part of the transaction? It's just like personal property. If not, how much do they owe? Are they willing to pay it off at closing? If not, can we, is it an assumable loan, and what's the payments on it? So you might buy the house and have an $800 payment and a $600 payment on the solar panels. And of course, your utilities are really low. They're like 100. So after 27 and a half or 8 years, you paid off the solar panels. Right, on that $100 savings, killing it. All right, so the things they say, all this stuff is included: garage door openers, lighting, landscape, keys and remote entry controls, attic and ceiling fans, and so on. Attached antennas and TV mounts. If we take that TV off the wall, there's actually a big hole back there. In most residential properties, there'll just be a mount attached. They changed this because when people took the mounts off, there was obviously cosmetic issues that had to be repaired. If the seller tried to repair it, it was typically bad, even if they got a professional, you know, because you've got this big, you got all this paint that was painted 5 years ago, and now you're trying to match it up. So they decided to leave the mounts on there a few years ago, which is a great idea. You can buy mounts anywhere. Over here on solar panels, we mentioned that propane tanks will get you into trouble really quick, especially on rural properties. If you're looking at the MLS detail and you're gonna write an offer on a property, it should say propane tanks owned or propane tanks leased. If not, and you see a propane tank or it says we've got propane heat or propane range or whatever, first question to ask, because if you own the tank, it should be included in the sale. We've had people fight about that too, but it should be, because you can't run the furnace or the range without it. But if it's leased, it means you've got to buy gas from a specific person. And that can be, I mean, challenging sometimes because one company may be higher than the other. You don't get to shop around for your gas. Hardwired security alarm systems. Everybody's got Ring and Nest and all this on their doors now. If you want it, you better put it in a contract, because we don't know whether they're leaving them or not. And then you get to the house the day of closing. I've had that phone call 15 times this year. Hey, they took the Ring doorbell. And so my first question is, did you include it in the offer? And they go, well, no. I mean, it was attached. But it's not hardwired, right? Those things are all wireless majority of the time. And they've got battery power, right? So we're seeing a lot of that. And the same thing with the Nest thermostats in the house and any other type of remote control that's not hardwired. Over on this side, all of these things make sense. But if you look in the kitchen cooking related, there's no refrigerators in there. There's ranges and everything else, but no refrigerators. And we'll get to that in a minute. And then over here, typically blinds or shades stay with the house. Now the curtains, those beautiful purple curtains that your grandmother made for your windows, you can take those with you, but you have to leave the hardware. The only way you can keep the hardware if you're the listing agent is to reserve it. You know, hardware will not stay. So then up front, the buyer knows that they want it, they've got to include it in the contract, including the purple curtains. And then attached mirrors and all bathroom mirrors. HGTV is guilty of causing this because all the flippers started just putting mirrors behind the sinks, not attaching them, you know, just setting the big mirrors because they're really attractive. And then you go to do the walkthrough and the mirror's gone. And so the attorney said, wait a minute. If it's in the bathroom and it's a mirror, it stays with the house. If not, it needs to be replaced. So we go through the house at the walkthrough, and some of these or one of these or any of these are gone. First thing you do, take a picture of whatever's gone. Let's say it's a built-in microwave or the range, and you text the agent the picture and you say, we've got a problem. The range is gone. And then you call the agent and you say, we're going to need either compensation or that range put back in before we close. And then if, then I would follow up with an email of the same thing and copy the brokers on it. Immediately. Don't wait on that. It's not like, well, let's ask him and see what he says. You know, with the technology we have, no problem. All right, then we get to the next part, which is what's included and what's not included. And notice the attorneys are pretty sharp. To avoid misunderstanding, list below as included or excluded any items may be subject to question, and then they give you some examples. Refrigerators, TVs, electronics, washer, dryer, and appliances. So in this one, look, the agent did a good job. They want the dishwasher. With attached, it's going to stay anyway, right? It's not a portable. But that's okay. I mean, she's saying she wants it, and she wants the disposal too. I don't know why anybody would take one under a sink, but it could happen. The freestanding stove, actually attached to, right, and stays. Electric, I don't know what that is. Refrigerator, and then the water softener. And water softeners.
That referred to the stove, electric stove.
Yeah, oh, okay. Freestanding stove, cold and electric. Okay. Refrigerator, though, notice they've included it. Now, I would go further there, wouldn't you? Yeah, refrigerator in kitchen. The reason being, I've got 3 refrigerators. I got one upstairs, I got one in the kitchen, and I got one in the garage that holds all the beer. Not all the beer, but some beer, and there's some other stuff in there too. Point is, I have seen people take the garage refrigerator and put it in the kitchen. And if you put refrigerator, you don't have a leg to stand on legally. So you could go further and say the stainless steel French door refrigerator currently in the kitchen. But I think if you put refrigerator in the kitchen, What the lenders say is at the end of this to write down these words, at no value. You can make note of that if you want to. I'm just in case.
Yeah.
Because it's really important because the lenders say, well, I'm not gonna loan on a refrigerator, which is stupid because they're loaning on a microwave, right? If it's built in, and a dishwasher, and a range. But they're not gonna loan on a refrigerator, which is more expensive than the other two. But they do have that in there. On the excluded, well, let's get back to the included. What else might be included? I mean, what's an example of something that you're walking through the house and your client says, I really wish they'd leave that.
Particular piece of furniture.
Big buffet.
Above ground swimming pool
Yeah. Included, right?
included.
Yeah, don't take that with you. Yeah, light fixtures. You know, there's some really intricate, beautiful fixtures out there now that are really expensive. You know, you just want to make sure they're included, that somebody's not going to take that out, because there are people that do that, you know. I sold a house down at Rockaway Beach one time, and this lady told me, you know, said, I don't want them to take light fixture above the kitchen table and stained glass, you know. So I walked over and tapped, I mean, it's plastic. I'm like, we'll make sure that doesn't happen, but you'll have to replace it, you know. It was, you probably pick it up for $3 at a flea market. The excluded is the same thing. So you could exclude the freestanding stove, couldn't you? You could say, I don't want that one. I'm gonna put in gas. I don't want your refrigerator, that janky green thing that's still running since 1964. They'll still be running in 2024 probably. I want a Samsung that'll break immediately after I put it in there. The water softener, but also outside the house, there's a lot of things such as included, is there a storage building in the backyard? If there's a storage building in the backyard, do I want it or not? If it's not on a permanent foundation, it's portable. And I've seen those drug out of yards too. Play sets. Do I want the play set or not? Maybe it's in great condition and maybe I want that to be a part of the purchase. Fire pits, I've seen those things drug out of yards all over the place now, the portable ones. Kind of shocking, really. Statuary. My mother-in-law's house right across the street, there was a house for 20 years and they had the big serpents with lion heads, probably 1,000 pounds apiece. Now, if I bought the house, I really wouldn't want them. So I would probably put that in the exclusion side. But you think about it, the sellers probably in their culture would love to have those. So you put that in there. Anything else? The exclusion line's a good line.
I've never really thought about it, but when you put excluded, does that mean I want you to take that away?
Yes.
I definitely
Then you
don't want
can
that here.
extend it. That's what I'm about to do is, the old red car by the storage building on blocks to be removed prior to closing.
Yeah.
The trash, metal trash, you know, in the backyard to be removed prior to closing. All limbs, you know, they could put that in special agreements, but I want to put it up front if I can, if I've got enough room to put that in there and get it done then. Because that's part of the offer, right? Part of the terms and conditions of the offer. So I like to get all that up front if I can. Excluded, solar panels. You imagine what that entails? So you got 20 panels on your roof and they're all bolted right through the shingles. And then they take all 20 off and they daub that black stuff on there. Polka dots. Okay.
Now, Jim, a lot of times in the MLS, it's already going to show us what's included, what's excluded, but by doing this, it's just reiterating and
Yeah.
everybody signs it to make sure that it's legal.
I really like the CYA part of a contract, you know, where I'm covering this. I'm saying, yeah, I want you to make sure and understand that this is what my buyer wants and this is what my buyer doesn't want. Even if it's a reserve item, if I want it, I'm gonna write it in the contract. We're looking at a farm right now, some clients I have, and they want the Kubota tractor with the attached front end loader and backhoe, the John Deere tractor with the little trailer attached, something else. Anyhow, I'm gonna be very specific when I say included. Because I wrote one on a farm before and I put, and I don't know why I did it. But anyhow, I put I think it was a John Deere, let's say tractor, and all attachments under the lean-to. And so they responded in a counter and said, the John Deere tractor to be included in the sale, and the bush hog and the front end blade and the something else. We left out the damn backhoe. And I'm like, they did that on purpose. Why? I don't know why they did, but I know they left it out on purpose. So we countered back and said, nope, we want the John Deere tractor, and the backhoe. But I mean, this is where you do it, and this is where you repeat it. And even if it's a reserve item, you can still request it in the contract if it makes a difference to you. And thinking of farms right now, a lot of times farms will have decorative items like statues and things like that outside. This one I showed the other day had a big metal elk, as big as me standing out in front. And the seller, I talked to him a little bit because waiting on my clients, and he said, now, the elk's included. And, it makes sense that it would be included because it's probably 1,000 pounds. But if I write the offer, what am I gonna do? Elk's included, The elk currently by the barn is included. All right, we get to the purchase price. Any questions here? Anything that you can or cannot put in there? Have you written a lot of contracts?
Not a
One.
lot, but
One,
yes,
two? Okay.
yes.
Just don't be afraid to ask questions because there's
Probably.
no silly questions here. This is where you get them answered before you have to call me at 9 o'clock on a Friday night.
That's why I'm here.
Purchase price, it was listed at $494,500, but look, they asked for $10,000 in concessions. Does that seem like a lot?
Depends.
Yeah, it does, but if you think about a loan, like on $100,000 loan, for FHA, the closing costs or loan origination fees and all that is 2.5% to 3%. 3% of 500,000 would be 15,000, wouldn't it? I mean, it does seem like a lot, but you've got to, and that's what I did with my clients was I broke it down and said, I want you to understand that, yeah, that seems like a lot, but if you put it relative to what they're going to get their loan for or whatever, then this may not be a lot of money. Anyhow, they agreed to it. Contract didn't go through. but
What if they don't require that much to get things fixed? They still get
It's not
it?
about fixes. These are concessions that typically are applied to the lender's fees and the
Oh, okay.
buyer's costs.
Okay,
It's not about repairs. This has nothing to do with repairs. I
Okay.
loved Adam Grady a couple weeks ago when he sat in here with Kerry Warsh and said, I always tell my clients that you can figure at least 1% in repairs.
okay, got it.
So you can figure 5,000 in repairs on a house that's 500,000. And if you tell them that up front and it's only 2,000, they're like, man, we dodged a bullet there, didn't we? But I really thought that was smart. I'd never done that before.
Okay,
But this had nothing to do with repairs. These are concessions credited by the seller. In other words, the seller's going to give up this money, but not until closing, to pay specific costs related to the buyer's, typically a loan, but it could be anything. And we'll get to that because it's the lender who decides this. It's not us, it's not the seller who decides how much of those concessions can be taken. How much do you think they're going to try to take, the lender?
All of it.
Yeah, 10,000. And if there's anything left over, it doesn't go to the buyer in cash. Like if they can only take 9,000 to pay their fees, then that 1,000 goes back to the seller.
oh, okay, cool.
They don't credit the whole amount.
So essentially what they're doing is offering 484.
Yeah, 484.5. Yeah, basic line too, and I tell my clients too, here's what you got to look at. Here's your net is 484. Minus commissions and your costs, And then no earnest money, and people freak about this. It used to be so common to put down earnest money. When I first started, which was in the 90s, if you can believe that, you might get 10% earnest money on a house like this. You might get $50,000 down as earnest money. Now, everybody understands that the contract serves as good faith, so you don't have to actually have money to cause good faith, and so they don't put it down a lot anymore. Now, most of my clients would have countered that and said, we want something. because they don't understand the process of paragraph 8, which says, you know, you can get all you want, but if things fall apart, the contract may say it goes back to them. Okay? Key on the earnest money, don't put 5 days. If you're putting down earnest money for your client, write 10 in that blank. Give your client time, because nobody runs around with a checkbook in their pocket anymore. Now, you can do it electronically now, and that's just become more common in 2023. But if they're gonna pay it with a check, you write the contract on Thursday, you get it negotiated on Friday, it gets 5 days really quick. And the key to that is, if you don't get the earnest money in time, the seller can terminate the contract, and that's it. Just like that, you're done with. So they just stay moot on the point. They know it's not at the title company. And then on that 5th day at midnight, you get an email at 12:01 a.m. saying we're terminating the contract because this buyer didn't perform the terms and conditions related to the earnest money. It's gone, you're done. And the buyer's gonna say, wait a minute. You didn't say anything to me about that, right? But if you put 10 in here, if you write it in, they're gonna see it, right? And they're gonna remember that it's in the contract. Here, it can get lost pretty quick. As far as additional earnest money goes, you know, we see this more commonly with new construction contracts. So you've got the house being built, and then the buyer goes, you know, I'd really like to have a different stone on the fireplace than what you proposed, what we agreed to. Could I get this? And the builder goes, yeah, that'll be $7,000 for me to change anything. And so they do, and they say, you got to put that down as earnest money and or non-refundable earnest money, right? Anybody that's done one has seen that probably from a builder. But if you run into that, I mean, the contract's pretty clear and it says what to use for that. So I don't have to go into a lot of detail on that. Closing, if you look at it, it's pretty clear too. Subject to the terms of the contract, terms and conditions, sale will be closed, meaning the unconditional release and the exchange of the deed for the purchase price, together with all other documents and funds required by this contract. That's what a closing is. So the last thing that has to happen at a closing is what?
Exchange of money.
The funding. And we know that because who's the last person to get it paid in a real estate transaction?
Us.
The realtor.
Right.
We're the last people. So if the funds aren't there, we don't have a closing. And I don't know how many you've done, but I've had times where my client, we're closing a duplex today. She's in Colorado. She's signing first. So it's not closed though, is it? And then the documents come back to the title company, and the title company, the buyer comes in and signs it. It's still not closed. We've got documents that have been executed on both sides, but until these funds are exchanged, then we don't have a closing. What used to be, and you guys are so lucky, they used to record the deeds like in batches, like Hogan would take, you know, Monday through Wednesday, they'd take all the deeds to the courthouse and record them. And then Friday, they'd take all the deeds and close it, and, you know, so really you didn't have a closing then either. But now it's electronic, so it closes, once it's funded and it's done, it's done. All right, we're gonna close at Meridian. This is a choice of the buyer. Your clients are gonna ask you, where do you wanna close? And you're gonna say,
Where would you like to close?
where would you like to close? And they go, I don't know. I haven't bought a house in 30 years. And you say, well, I use a couple different title companies on a regular basis, and I've had, you know, good results with them. The key to this is that they, you know, are professional. They get the title work done correctly, and we don't have any problems there, and the closing goes smoothly. So, you know, Hogan's been in business for 60 years. They're a great company. I've had great success with Titan Title, and Meridian does a good job. Who would you like to use? Well, you pick it. Okay. And I pick it. I didn't pick this one. I mean, it's the soup du jour is Meridian right now. But hell, before that, it was Great American for a long time. They were like, ooh, Great American. Me, Hogan. I could go someplace, been in business a long time, it's got a reputation, they're worried about losing. So I go to them a lot, but your client will ask you where to close, because they don't know unless they're experienced people, like the investors, they know exactly where they want to close. The builders are going to tell you, we're closing it here because that's where all my accounts are. And I need us to keep everything together. So don't fight them on that. But I do not like it, and maybe some of you do it, but you can if you want to. When you put in there, seller prefers to close at Meridian. Yeah, right. You like it because you got drinks in the back, I don't do that. I never have. And I don't think I ever will, because I think it really, by law, it's buyer's choice, not the seller's choice. Seller can close wherever they want to too, but typically the buyer gets to choose the title company because they're the one writing the contract. Right, possession and all keys delivered to the buyer at closing. It says in bold, hey, you're not responsible for this. But we all take the keys and the openers to closing. For some reason, we do that because we're just good people, I guess. One of the best closing gifts you can give anybody is 417 rekey, and just have them rekey the locks. That's really a great closing gift. Not that expensive. I mean, it's not cheap, but it's not that expensive. And then now they've got all these they're not new locks, but they're new keys. Attach a rider of possession to be transferred other than at closing, as of closing. And there are three. There's a buyer, possession by buyer prior to closing, possession by seller after closing, then limited purpose entry. Buyer prior to closing, I hate it. It's like buying a used car. It looks good on the lot, you drive it off, Possession by seller after closing. How many things can go wrong there? You've closed, you've been funded, they've got all the keys, they've got everything. They've got 3 dogs in the house and 4 kids. Nothing's gonna happen in the next 2 weeks, or 3 weeks or a month or whatever. I don't like either one of them, but I do like limited purpose entry by buyer prior to closing. I've used this a bunch because we're asking somebody to move from, Willard to Springfield. Doesn't sound like very bad. But if the other house is going to be vacant prior to closing, wouldn't it be a great idea if the buyer could move all their boxes into one of their garage stalls? Not the big stuff, the movers come to get all that, sometimes the day of closing, but if you could move some of that stuff, that'd be nice. It would really take a lot of stress off the buyer. And the seller, like typically when I've had them, is sure, fine. And then I put in it here, garage only, no access to home. You don't want them moving their furniture in and beating up the walls and stuff like that. But I really like that one. Now, if you ever sell a farm, you think about a farm, just a small farm, 10 acres. How many trailers you got? Probably 3, got a tractor, probably got 4 chickens, 2 pigs, a cow. You can't move them all in one day. So to have limited purpose entry would mean you could access the other property you're moving to if it's a farm and move those items on there. It really makes sense. And I've used that quite a bit on farm properties. Unless specified otherwise, the seller warrants property will be vacant at the time of closing. If it's got tenants, you got a whole big ball of wax going on, you're going to need all the rent agreements and all that, and it's a whole different deal. And typically, we do not have that. If it does, then you're going to have to use this rider right here. And again, I say that's 1 or 2% of the property. So you're not going to run into that very often. Are we good? Page 1 didn't take that long. No questions.
Oh, can I ask?
Yeah, you can ask one.
Line 25, do you put Meridian title there?
There's no earnest money because it says on 25,
I mean,
earnest
there
money
was.
shall be delivered to buyer.
If there was earnest money.
Is there? Yes.
Then you-
Yeah, I'd put the same title company. It makes sense. Further on page 2, it's going to ask who's going to do the title work. It makes sense to use the same where the earnest money is and where you're going to close. That should be the same person doing the title work. You could have 3 or 4 different title companies, but I think it's going to cost money. It's going to cost additional money for the buyer. But due on 26, put 10. Did you write that in the blank already?
Yes.
Okay, good girl.
I-
I want to make sure you do that. All right, the contract's not contingent upon the sale and closing of other existing property or buyer. In other words, maybe contingent on some other stuff, but I don't have to sell a house. If you check that box, that one's gone. If you check this box, this contract is contingent on the sale and or closing of an existing property or buyer. If the box checked, then you've got to have one of the two riders, either the contingency for sale or the contingency for closing. The contingency for sale, that property that I'm going to sell may not even be listed. Pretty weak. Now, are we taking those now? We didn't take them the last 2 years, but yeah, we might take one of those right now. Where's the house at? You know, send me an address, whatever. But that means it's not under contract, whether it's listed or not. If it was under contract, then it would be a contingency for closing, right? This is not a strong offer, but we're taking those now because we'll take anything, you know, right? If it's a good offer.
Working with somebody like New American Funding, where they buy the house, so it gets you out of a contingency. I mean, what kind of concessions is a seller? Do they have to,
Seller doesn't make any concession.
well, I mean, for the people that are buying the house, that have a house to sell,
Mhm.
do they have to take a lot less for their property to get
No.
it sold 10 days, working with the New American Funding or
I
the
don't know anything
closing?
about New American Funding. I mean, just think of it this way.
They will close on a house in 10 to 14 days.
Mhm.
And then you don't have to have a contingency. So they'll buy your buyers.
How many of those transactions have you done?
None.
Okay. I'm guessing it's gonna be a 60% purchase price, because that's what I'd offer you. I mean, if you wanna
Okay.
sell your house to me so that you can do this, I'll give you 60% of value, market value. That's just like Cantrell and Revore, they advertise, we'll buy your house, don't worry about it, you know?
Right.
You get into the details on that.
Yeah.
It's gonna be at least 20% below
And then you
market.
have the closing cost on the one you're buying, and then you have the closing cost on the one you've sold quick. You are anyway, but
Well, the closing costs on the one you sell are typically title search and then document prep fees and taxes. That's all you got. You got to pay your mortgage off, but you don't have a closing cost like you would if you're a buyer. The buyer has a closing cost. That's where the big money is.
oh, really? Okay, I
Oh,
didn't
yeah.
realize that.
Yeah,
Okay,
on yours, you own anything on your rental property?
no,
So all you're gonna have is your title search, probably 200, then you're gonna have your document prep fee, which is 200. And then you're gonna pay your taxes prorated if you hadn't already paid them. And then you'll pay commission if you charge it, but it's your property, so you don't have to charge it.
right. Okay.
Or whatever. You talk to Rachel about that. I don't know.
This is looking sweeter.
Contingency for closing, to me, that's just like getting a loan. I mean, I love those offers. If it's already under contract, I'm praying, which is the first question I asked the other agent, if they send me a contingency for the close of buyers, is it through inspections already? If it is, you know, we're golden. All we're waiting for is closing. Now, we've had a ton of transactions fall apart in the last 6 months to a year once the market changed and the interest rates changed. So that's a good, strong offer to me. The point being here, the main thing to know from a contractual standpoint is if you check that box, then you've got to attach one of these two riders. And it needs to be accurate because this one puts the other house, if they accept it, active with contingency. This one puts the house, if they accept it, the one you're buying, as pending. Which you want pending if you can get it, because then that takes the house off the market essentially. Somebody can write a backup, but that's so rare. All right, we get down to appraisal contingency. I'd suggest you get an appraisal on everything. I don't care what it is, what you're buying. Even if you're representing an investor, a lot of times I'll mark that box and the other people kick it back or they'll say, oh, you know, we can't have it on appraisal, whatever. But you know, I don't want to buy a $30,000 house that's only worth 20. If my bank decides if I wanted to borrow money and they decide to just do a drive-by and say, man, that thing's only worth 20,000, that's all we'll loan you on it. You know, if I want to borrow 30, I want to get 30 out of it. But we're not talking about that typically. The point is, if you're going to do the appraisal contingency, you're protecting your buyer. You're saying, I'm buying a $494,500 property. I want to make sure that I'm protected. So you would come down to here and say that that appraisal contingency runs the term of the contract, if it's me. So if it's a 45-day contract, then I want it to run 45 days. Because if I run it 25 days, you know what the appraiser does? He doesn't even go out and look at the house for the last 2 weeks of the transaction. And if he brings it to you on the 30th day and says, hey, sorry, didn't appraise, you don't have any right to go back to the seller and say, I need the price reduced. So we have a $495,000 property, it comes back in at 480, they deliver, the buyer does, an appraisal notice to me, MSC 2020N, which says basically the appraised value of the house was 480. I want you to reduce the house to 480. I'm paraphrasing obviously here. And then my seller has choices, right? Choice number one, reduce the price to 480. Choice number two, buyer, you need to come up to 495, you know? In other words, I'm sticking with my price. Let's split the difference. Negotiate it somewhere in there. And the last one is, buyer can terminate the contract without penalty because the lender won't loan on that value. Protect your client here with 45 days or term of the contract. Now, you don't have to. It's up to you. But hell, every appraisal I see comes in on the last week of the transaction or last 10 days at the very least. And you don't have any time then, you're out of it. You can't go to the seller and say, look at under appraised, $100,000 house. It appraised for 90. The buyer's going, I'm gonna, you know, I'm paying $10,000 too much. Well, I'm sorry. You know, I didn't write the contract the way I should have. I didn't protect you. I didn't do my fiduciary duties. Okay? And then they have a appraisal resolution deadline. It just says, look, you've got 5 days, seller, you need to make a decision. That's what I like about it. I'm not going to change that to anything other than 5 because I want them to, you know, we're 40 days into the contract. Are you going to make a decision or not? Financing contingency, 1, 2, or 3 below. We see a lot of this with investors, not contingent upon financing. Like if I bought a house that I was going to remodel slash flip, if you want to call it that, I can buy it, you know. I mean, unless it's ridiculous, I've got enough money to buy it. But I might not want to use all my cash to buy that, especially when you know you could borrow money at 3%. You'd be stupid to use your cash if it was earning 5 to 7. So I always check that box. It's not contingent on financing, but I could finance part of it if I wanted to. So maybe it's a $100,000 remodel house and I pay 50 cash and borrow 50 because I want to use the other 50 to remodel it. And then it's worth 200. Now I get 50 back. Non-conventional, if it's a government loan, it's going to be marked that box. Any type of government loan, USDA, FHA, VA, MHDC, HUD, whatever it is, that box has to be checked. If that box checked, then this has to be attached. MSC 2011R, which is a rider that says this is a government loan, and that rider is designed to protect the buyer. Say this house has got to appraise and you're not doing anything shady under the table. Those are the 2 things that are on that document. And everybody has to sign it. And the conventional, what's crazy about this is I think this line ought to be above everything else. And then all 3 can be under there because it says the buyer agrees to do all things reasonably necessary, including but not limited to completing an application, et cetera, et cetera. That should be above any of the financing part, right? But it looks like it only goes with part 3 under C. But don't you think the government loans, they should do everything they're required? I mean, I think this is misplaced. I've talked to the attorneys about it, but yeah, okay.
That's good.
Conventional loan, if you mark that box, it's going to be a 5% down or less or more, I mean. So it could be 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 50, could be anything. But you can't typically get a conventional loan that's higher than 95.5. 95% loan, 5% down. Now, go on down there and read all that if you want to, but the key is loan contingency deadline. 25 days again. What do you want in there?
Term of the contract.
Term of the contract, you really do, because when does a lender call you and say, we've got a problem? 42? I mean, that's when they do it. The buyer went out and bought a truck, or we just ran his credit again, and it turns out that his income won't apply because it's not exactly the same kind of job he had last year. You know, he was a nurse practitioner, now he's just a nurse. I mean, stupid stuff like that, but they do it, and the lender, who did it to him? It wasn't the lender, who was it?
The realtor.
Or underwriting, I love it, the lender always says, it's the underwriter.
Oh,
The underwriter is making me do this. It's like, oh, yeah, uh-huh. But I always put the term of the contract in there, are pretty darn close. Because it goes on down to later on in the document here. It says on line 95, if the loan contingency deadline passes without a termination, buyer remains obligated under this contract and must have available all funds required to close. Loan commitment or pre-approval does not guarantee the buyer's loan will actually fund. That even applies to government loans. Did you know that? Good luck enforcing that. It gets a disabled veteran who's an Asian and a woman and has changed sexes. Just kidding. I am being recorded. Forgive me.
Lord, I apologize.
Point is, you know what I mean? I mean, just good luck on it, but on any government loan, if you thought you were going to sue somebody who made that application, you're not gonna win on that one, but a seller might try to do it. Okay? Here, you need to fill out something. If you're not gonna fill out a percentage, the loan amount, like an FHA loan is 96.5, right? A conventional might be 95. Or maybe I'm putting down 20%, and it's an 80% loan. I don't have to put the exact number because then you have to use your calculator, right? 80% of 494.5. You know, I think I'll just put that down. I want a 95% or 100%. Notice they put nothing in there. Our compliance would kick this back out, which is good because these are part of the terms and conditions of the contract. What type of loan is it going to be? 95% right now, at least, fixed. We're not running into adjustables yet. You typically run into adjustable loans if that loan amount gets, or the interest rate gets above 8%. Then people start looking at adjustables really hard. Because you got a 3-1 on an adjustable, that means you get 3 years of it going up 1%. If you get a 5% on the front side, it's not gonna get to 8% for 3 more years. You'd be a lot better off buying that and, you know, hoping and praying that it went down. Amortization terms typically gonna be 30 years, and it's typically gonna be fixed again. Now, what other terms could you put here on the loan? Well, you could put contingent right here on the buyer signing a contract with Spring Creek Public Schools by August 15th, or now by December 15th. If that was part of it, you know, they're not getting the loan unless they sign this contract. Contingent upon the buyer signing a contract with O'Reilly Automotive by whatever date. You could put that right there because that becomes a terms and conditions of the financing. Because the buyer can't buy unless he has this job and is being paid the salary that they've been told. Hopefully you don't run into these, but when you do, if your client's not protected and you get the wrong brokerage on the other side or the wrong seller, then we've got challenges. On title and survey, any seller paid title fee set forth below are in addition to concessions. So at $10,000 doesn't cover any seller fees. Okay, those are paid for the buyer. Seller shall transfer marketable title to the property subject only to permitted exceptions. This is what the title company does. So as soon as you put something under contract, if you're the listing agent or the buyer's agent, You know who the title company is? Shoot it to them. Because you'd like to get that title back, commitment, within 10 days. And the title commitment comes back to you typically, which is crazy. A lot of times they don't even send it to the buyer. As soon as you get it, forward it. Now, it's not your job to read it, but you should. You should at least look at it. And most good title companies will tell you, we got a problem. You know, there's easement here, or there's the seller has a child support issue, a fairly significant amount, $32,000 against the property. Because that's against the property now, if you got child support. The seller has a state tax lien or a federal tax lien. Or, you know, we ran the title work and the seller doesn't own the property. Or, you know, what we're finding when we do our title work is it's a mother and a son that own this property. Do you have any idea what's going on with that? And you're like, oh, I don't have any idea, you know? Then you call the mom, you go, oh yeah, he died last year, you know? I've got one of those. That's their job anyhow. You want to get that quickly, and as soon as you get it, push it on. If you need to, if they don't say there's anything wrong, you just shoot an email back to them. Do you see anything wrong with it, you know? But you should kind of read through it at least. You're not an attorney, so you're not going to be able to understand it all, but you should be able to read it. Then your choices. All right, so we've got the title work. We're going to close it at this title company. Who's going to pay the cost? This is not fair to the seller. On A, the seller is going to deliver the title commitment and then pay for the buyer's insurance. Not their home insurance, hazard insurance, but their title insurance. That's not fair. On $500,000, it's probably $2,000 or $3,000. This one says the seller shall deliver the title commitment. They'll split it 50-50. Still not fair. Because again, the seller's title costs are pretty inexpensive, right? Probably $400. C is fair. The seller pays and says, look, I'm going to deliver you good title. And then the buyer pays a premium to protect him during his ownership and over that period when that seller owned it. At least that big. So that protects the buyer. He's paying for it. I don't want to pay the buyer's insurance on something. And the seller gets protected because they've done a good title search. And then D, you want to sweeten the pot someday to a dumb agent? Is tell on like $150,000 purchase or something. Tell your buyer, say, you know, let's pay the seller's title cost. And then you call the agent and say, look, right up front, I'm just going to tell you, you know, this is a good offer. And my buyer has agreed to pay the seller's title cost. Make sure and tell them that. Make sure and point it out on page 2 because that's really important. Well, it's $400. Sounds like a lot, right? I thought you'd really like it. I love that as an incentive because it sounds really good. It's not that much. Now, you throw it the other way around and say that the seller is going to pay the buyers. I mean, that doesn't sound good at all. But even on this $500,000 sale, how much were the title costs? 200 and 200. Just think about it. Kind of like the BAF doing this team meeting this morning. You know, you don't like it, I don't care. Now, in 107, it says the buyer at his option and expense can obtain a survey of the property. And this was 13 acres again, but they didn't want one. So what are they trying to do? They're trying to determine if the legal description is correct, if there's any defects, encroachments, overlaps, boundary line disputes, or whatever. I mean, if you buy a 40-acre property and you get your survey and it comes back to 28 properties, you're getting burned pretty good, aren't you? Not a bad idea on property. You know, if you don't know that it's X number of acres, that you get a survey, okay? And it goes on to say on the next page, which we'll get to, that if the buyer pays for a survey and determines there is an encroachment, an overlap, a boundary line, or an acreage discrepancy, or another adverse material like sinkholes that weren't disclosed, once I've got that in a legal document, then I can send notice to the seller and say, look, you know, we've got these discrepancies and I need for you to either adjust the price. If I'm buying 40 and I get 28, and it's $10,000 an acre, 120,000, right? And the seller goes, forget it, I've had this thing for 50 years, and I'm not paying nothing. Well, then it says, you send them this document, MSC 2055 AM, which is a notice that says, look, there's some problems here we need to have fixed prior to closing, or an adjustment made in price. And you want to get that there, and then the seller has 7 days to respond. Seller fails to timely respond to buyer's objection, the seller be deemed to have refused to agree to correct any of them. If the contract's terminated, earnest money refunded to buyer. And if the defect objected causes were a failure of marketable title, then now the seller has to pay for that survey that the buyer paid for. That's a good deal, isn't it?
Yeah.
You're the one that, I wanted in good faith to buy this, but I wanted to do a survey and it turned out there's these problems. Now I can't buy it. The contract's terminated. Now you owe me for the survey.
How often?
It happens.
Have you experienced that yourself?
Yeah.
And
And well, not just me, but other agents. And the thing I warn people is you're probably gonna have to pursue them
yeah,
in civil
that's what I
court.
was curious about.
Yeah, but it's a survey. What's the minimum cost? 2,500, just
Yeah.
a minimum. And then in if you had a big land survey, it could be $5,000-7,000. But it turns out that, you're buying 200 acres and it's 175 or something like that. Now I want to go back here real quick and show you back on page 2. 20 days to review this survey. You're not gonna get a survey in 20 days, are you? No. Probably not even on a lot. So you need to put that how long?
Contract?
Term of the contract. So, and then you've got to start making phone calls immediately to get a survey, right? And hope that you can get one in 45 days and then hope you have time to review it. So sometimes on rural property, if you're gonna have to get a survey, maybe your contract date is 60 days. Okay, but don't put 20 in there. Since title commitment's also talking about a review period on the survey though, too.
You can always extend your closing date too.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. Yeah, I think so. On a rural property and if you know you're gonna get a survey, be better off starting at 60 days than you would 45 or 30 for sure, even if it's a cash purchase.
Or amend the date,
You could amend it. But what does an amendment require?
signatures.
Of both parties. Yeah, I want to extend it. I'm the buyer and the survey's not done yet. And the seller goes, I'm not extending it. Did they do that?
Yeah, the contract is what it is until it's changed.
That's exactly right. Good job.
Can you take the survey fee out of the closing cost?
What's that now?
Can you have the survey fee come out of the closing cost?
If you're going to do that, you need to write it into special agreements. For the buyer, you mean? That would be between the buyer and the surveyor. But if you wanted the seller to pay for the survey, you negotiate that right up front in the offer. You put in special agreements. You say, all parties agree that the seller will pay for a survey of the land being purchased or whatever. Yeah, we're not there yet. That's page 7.
Oh.
But we're gonna get there. Maybe. All right, paragraph 7, the inspection paragraph. Look at your watch, what's going on? We're not 3 more hours. I want you to look at the first line. Property is being sold in its present condition. What does that mean? I mean, really, what does it mean? As is, it's really as is, isn't it? That's what it says. Now, that's not necessarily true, but it does say that in the contract with no warranties. Expressed or implied is except may be given to the buyer in writing. So what it goes on to say is, look, if there's problems with the property, you need to consider that in your offer if you're representing the buyer, or the buyer needs to consider it. But if I walk into a house and I get on the porch and the glass in the door is broken, I'm writing that in the offer. Okay? I'm not gonna put, I'm reducing it by $200 to fix this glass. I'm writing seller to repair the glass. And you walk in and there's a hole in the ceiling. It's obviously water damage. I'm writing it in the offer. I mean, Either that, or I'm, reducing the price, and that's what that's saying right there. These things that are clearly visible should be considered by the buyer in setting the purchase price or by making correction of such conditions by seller requirement of the contract. And you really should think about that, I mean, could you ever ask for carpet in a contract? Heck, yeah. You go on a carpet, I mean, you know what I'm talking about, the bedroom where they kept the dog. Seller to replace the door in the third bedroom and replace the carpet with those, standard grade carpet. Buyer to pick the color. Yeah, seller to take the 16-year-old's bedroom and it's all black and repaint the ceiling white. You can do all of that, okay? Unless you're using an as-is inspection writer, and if you do use an as-is inspection writer, remember there's three kinds of as-is. One is, I'm buying it as is with no rights to terminate the contract, and I don't even get to inspect it. Another choice is, I'm buying it as is, but I have the right to an inspection. Okay? But I don't have the right to terminate. And the other one is, I'm buying it as is, but I have the right to inspect and I have the right to terminate, which is basically the contract. But that is, if you're going to include an as-is inspection writer, make sure you check the right box. So you have some investors that say, I'm buying it, I don't care. But you have other investors say, I'm buying it contingent on an inspection. So those are separate choices in that rider. What's funny about this paragraph too, which most people don't know, it allows the buyer to do the inspection. So you buy the house, you can inspect it, or your grandmother. You get to choose the person you think's qualified. You could actually have, buyer can choose and appraise the house themselves. The thing is, if a buyer inspects the property and is going to provide an inspection notice, then it has to be a written report of some kind. It could just be pictures. It says, look, I saw this leak under the sink, fix it, that kind of thing. But he's going to have to provide some kind of report because later on it asks for that. But the buyer can't do it. You're going to run into that. Or the buyer's going to have Uncle Bob inspect it or something. Again, you're going to have it in writing. Next paragraph should be the buyer remorse paragraph. Section B under 7. It says within 0 days, but it could be 5 if nothing stated. After the effective day, the buyer may review additional data regarding the property. Now it gives you a list of things, and I get it. Okay? Registered sex offenders, convicted criminals. I get those. This kind of stuff, regulations, taxes, school district, square footage of the land or improvements, those things, a little bit goes on the buyer's agent, but the buyer really is responsible to some degree. So if they have issues with that, they should put something in here. As to sex offenders, they ask you about that, say, you know what? Missouri State Highway Patrol, you can go on their site, or Greene County or Christian County, you go on the sheriff's site, and they'll have a list of them. And they'll have addresses. And make sure the map is expanded, because if it's real small, it'll look like they're everywhere. I mean, really, especially criminal infractions, like assault and robbery and things like that. If the map's squeezed down, if it's orange, it's going to be orange wherever there is one. But you have them do that. You're not supposed to do that. Here's the deal with this though. If they put 5 in there, anytime in the 5 days, they can just email you and say, we're terminating the contract after further review, period. They don't have to use that document. Property data review termination notice. They can just send you an email. Now, if I was going to do it, I think I'd use that notice. But the point is, doesn't matter what it is. They could say whatever they wanted to. It's not after an inspection. Maybe their mother-in-law hadn't seen the house yet. And they take her over there and go, do you realize this is where Johnny Sue Smith lived right over there? You remember that guy? You don't want to live in this neighborhood. Does mother-in-laws do that? Yes. Or I can't believe you're buying this with, no formal dining room or pink paint or whatever it might be. Terminate.
You have to provide a reason.
No, none.
Just say
After further
per-
review.
Yeah, per line 145.
Yeah, kind of like an NFL game. After further review, we've determined that we just don't want to buy this house anymore. And you're done, it's terminated. Nothing you can do to hold it together. So you notice, we'd already talked, the agent and I said, now, if you're gonna send over any days on that, I'm not accepting your offer, I'm just gonna counter it, because I'm gonna put 0 in that blank. And she said, well, my broker says you can't do that. And I said, well, send it on over, but when you get it back, it's gonna have a 0 right there. Because I don't think that's fair to the seller. Woo-hoo, we got an offer for $494,500, even with 10,000 concessions. Yes, house is sold. 4.5 days later, you get a call from the other agent or an email and it says, we're terminating the contract after further review. Or they send you the termination notice. That termination notice doesn't need any signature except the buyer's. Seller doesn't even get to address it in any way. I hate that paragraph. That came out of St. Louis or something.
Well, that's something they should have checked into before they even decided to write the contract.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing too. It's like the square footage deal, which gets me all the time as a reason to terminate a contract. Somebody buys a house and it says it's 3,000 square feet, okay? And then the appraisal comes back and it's 2,900. They go, oh, we're out of here. We don't want to buy the house. It's like, wait a minute, you looked at it 3 times, okay? And you signed a measurement disclaimer. And the house size has not changed. It's the same house. I get it, 100 square feet, if it's finished space, it might be worth $150 a square foot for an appraiser, but it's not changing where you're living or anything. So I've never have got that one very well. I could see if it was 500 or 600 square feet or 1,000 or something like that. But there are errors made. As you know, in Christian County, if you use the CRS tax records information, they include the garage in their base square footage. Now, they may have changed that, but they did that for years. So there were houses that were 1,200 square feet with a 400-foot garage, and they're all 1,600 square feet. You're getting it for 90,000. You're thinking, man, I'm getting a heck of a house here. Back then, not now, I'm not 90 now. Anyhow, I don't like that one. I'm just telling you up front. But when I get an offer that has days in there, I'm countering that. And that might be the only thing we counter. And maybe my seller doesn't want to. Maybe my seller says, no, it's fine. We'll just leave it like that. If the seller says that, then I'm fine.
I've run into that, and it's typically because they do have a specific question related to, they really want to check into this or check into that or whatever. They don't just arbitrarily put it on.
I would
Or I
agree with
ask
that.
them why,
Yeah.
why is this 2 days?
Mhm.
And well, it's because they want to check into X, Y, or Z. Then I'm better with it.
I would be better with that if it was specific. If they told me up front, look, my buyer's got 2 young daughters and they want to make sure they thoroughly see if there's any sex offenders in the area. I'd be fine with that. But just don't put randomly 5 days in there, because I've seen it happen. And I tell you where it happens, no offense, with people with money. They do it all the time. Because, they just do. Don't ask me why, but those are the ones that I've seen traditionally do it. They're buying a $600,000 house, and then somebody in the family comes over and makes them decide that they don't want it. Or maybe they just wake up sober the next day and they see it and they go, what the heck were we doing, And they're out of there, just like that. I don't see it very much on lower end properties. But, I'm going to be let's back up there. With sex offenders, I'm really sensitive to that, I've got kids, raised kids and still raising another one. So I'm sensitive to that. But if they told me that, that'd be something. But if they said the square footage, I'd say, you know what, I'll tell you what, why don't you call Todd Reed for $125, he'll come in and measure it today or tomorrow. But he'll do it quick. It won't be an appraisal, it'll just be a measurement if that's what you're worried about. And we'll just hold your offer until then. We'll just basically say, you're first in line. I'll give you my word on that.
We lost one to a Hell's Angels headquarters. So we bought it sight unseen from out of state. And because they looked at the map and it was close to campus, or they thought it was, compared to the state that
Comparatively
they lived
speaking.
in.
Yeah, that was mine.
And then then they got here and drove right past this Hell's Angels. You've been there.
It's like a-
That was one of their daughters.
Just kidding.
Their
Yeah,
daughter was living
yeah,
there.
they said, hey, we didn't know.
Yeah.
You know,
You know, it's funny because I saw a commercial property yesterday that came up, popped up, and I was looking at it just, you know, just to see what it was about. It was on Kearney. But the description said within 2 miles of campus, within 3.5 miles of Bass Pro, and that's all true,
yeah,
you know? But, you know, if you're not from the area and you see all those things, think Bass Pro headquarters, you know, Missouri State University with 25,000 students, and then they had the traffic count there, and it looks like, dang, it's Beaveroo on Kearney,
Oh,
is
yeah.
what it is.
yeah.
And I'm looking at it thinking, man, that sounds good if I'm from out of the area, but if I'm from Springfield, I'm going like, I know where that is. That's not a good place to be with a business. And they put in there too, did you see in the remarks? It had 1,300 customers the first day it opened or something. I forget what it was. I'm like, that's really good marketing. It hadn't had anybody since then.
Yeah, one and done.
All right, so you can, the buyer at its option, or they can pay somebody to get a written inspection report of the condition of the property as reasonably deemed necessary by buyer or lender. Most people are going to get inspections. They really are. So you don't have to worry about that. Now, what can they inspect? They can inspect anything. I don't care what it is. And I tell the story, and I've told it before, so you're gonna hear it again. I had a person one time that wanted to inspect for spirits, evil spirits in a house down around the college, Southeast One, is what they used to call it. So, okay, so we go down there and this bigger lady in a moo-moo comes in and all this stuff. Sure as heck, what do we got? Evil spirits, yeah. We said, how do you get rid of them? Well, we have a seance, or we can pray. I said, well, let's get with it, you know? They didn't like that. We lost the sale. But any inspection report. Now, the thing is, down here where you put days, if you're me, you're not gonna put anything but 15 there. You're gonna start with 15, because if you do need a roofer to look at it, you can ask the seller to do it, but who's responsible for all inspections?
Buyer.
The buyer. So if I need a few more days for that, or if it's in the country and it's got a septic and a well, if I'm representing the buyer, I mean, well tests aren't that hard to do. It's just a pain, you know? And I can't inspect a septic at all. So I've got to get somebody who'll come out there. And then what else has to happen? Somebody has to dig it up. You know who's responsible for digging it up per this contract? Exposing it?
The seller.
Hmm.
Go ahead.
It used to say in the contract, the seller was responsible for exposing the septic and returning it to the surface, you know, after inspections were completed. Buyer is responsible for all inspections. So if you want the septic uncovered, where should you put it? In the special agreements on page 7, you should say, seller agrees to uncover the septic prior to inspection. Number one, who knows where the septic is? The seller. Buyer doesn't have a clue. Seller might know, may not know. And on this house, in fact, it was Julie Van Vig Burnell, and she knew that the buyer was responsible, and the inspector showed up. And the seller just happened to be, the seller's son happened to be there. And he said, well, I can't inspect that, you know, that's just the tube, you know, I need the cover off of it. And so the seller son dug the septic up so he could inspect it. I called her and I said, what the hell, Julie, you know better than that. She goes, well, yeah, it was supposed to have been uncovered yesterday. So she did know, and you need to know too, because I mean, that's expensive most of the time. It's $150, $175 to get somebody out there to uncover it. But any report, any inspection they want to do. And then after the buyer completes that, the buyer's got to furnish a copy of the relevant portions of the report. I don't believe in that. Here's what I believe. As soon as I get a copy of the inspection report, I push send and I forward it right on to the other agent, to the listing agent. I want them to see all 60 or 70 pages of it. There's nothing in there to be hidden. Why try to figure out how to take out page 13, section B? No, you know, I'm not smart enough to do it. I mean, I could, but it'd take a long time. So I just send them the whole report immediately and I'll say, This is not the inspection notice, but I want you to be aware of what's in the report. We'll be preparing the inspection notice, once we get time. Then you make sure the buyer's got a copy of the inspection report. And then you sit down with them and talk to them. Key here is how long do you have to do it? 15 days. And notice they added 7, which is a good idea on a rural property because they don't know what they're going to run into. So they had 22 days total to do inspections, which I'm fine with that. It was a long closing anyway. To get this additional time, let's say you get to day 13, you don't have everything together yet. All you have to do is send them an email or a text, but it has to be in writing, or you can use MSC 2047N. Okay, the key is you get one shot. Remember the rap song?
Yeah.
Yeah. You get one shot, that's all you get. Used to, you'd have an inspection, you'd send over that notice. You'd have a roof inspection, you send over that notice. You'd have a foundation inspection, you send over that notice. You get a septic, you might send 5 notices. You wouldn't know when it's gonna be done. And there wasn't a time limit on it most of the time, I don't think. I think it's 30 days or something. So you get notice after notice after notice after notice. At least this limits it and says you get one shot and that's it. Anything comes up after that, we can negotiate, but it's probably not gonna happen. Key for you as a buyer's agent, if you're writing the offer, the buyer may not object to anything that's not in an inspection report. Just because they don't like it, they can't write it in there, no matter what it is. So it's gotta be in the report. It's gotta say roof somewhere if you're gonna ask for a roof. It's gotta say septic somewhere if you're gonna ask for a septic. But if it's just them saying, I don't like the color of the carpet, you can't do that if it's not in the report. Now, if the inspector goes, the carpet's destroyed in the back bedroom, you could ask for it there legally. Now, here's the second part where the buyers get a break. If an inspection notice is timely given, it shall state, if the buyer is satisfied with all inspections. I've never gotten one. 2, there are unacceptable conditions which need to be satisfied by the seller. Notice what it says, not by a professional or licensed or anything like that. It says in a workmanlike manner prior to the scheduled closing date, unless you can negotiate that in an amendment. Or 3, buyer elects to terminate the contract. Here we are 21 days into the contract and they send over, we're terminating the contract.
Workmanlike is a kind of a broad term, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, sure. That's why they've got it in there because people used to write in there, I want a licensed framer to fix that wall.
They
There
still
ain't
do.
such thing.
They still do.
They do. Great, go get one. He's got a business license, which is $25 and you don't have to even prove that you have any skills.
Yeah. With receipts.
Yeah. Yeah. So you get this here. Buyer can terminate the contract after the inspection. Unless you check box 175, which is a limitation of the inspection rights. It means that the buyer's unilaterally waiving its right to terminate the contract. They're saying, I've got to give the seller an opportunity to correct these. Now I do the same thing as I do up on C up there. I say, you know what? If this box isn't checked, we're not accepting your offer. That's just me. Art over at Coldwell Banker says that's not a valid contract. You shouldn't be teaching that. My point is this, is it a balanced contract if the buyer can walk out after 5 days with no reason? Or is it balanced if the buyer can walk out after 22 days off the market? There may be reasons, but maybe they're not legitimate. Maybe it's all cosmetic stuff, but it's in the inspection report. That's not balanced. That's not fair to me. Give me a chance to respond. I don't care what you write up. You can write up 50 items. And then the seller has the option of saying, I can fix this or I will fix this prior to closing. And you'll see that, won't you? A buyer will write up, or a buyer's agent will write up 2 pages of stuff and say, fix all this. And then, but then you've given the seller the opportunity to make the repairs, to correct those items. Roof, septic, all new windows, doesn't matter what it is, you're still giving them an opportunity. So I like 175 checked on my contracts, but you can do what you want to. If you're protecting your buyer, you would say, we're gonna leave that unchecked. Because that way we've got a right to terminate if there's something comes up in the inspection report that scares you. And it does a lot of times, right? With a buyer, septic issue, oh my God.
Yeah.
What do you mean the septic tank is undersized? It's only 1,000 gallon? You know, it's supposed to be 1,200. No turds floating on the ground or anything, but it's, I mean, you know what I mean? It's working, it's functioning as designed. Or the water heater gurgles.
First time home buyers scared to death of every inspection, untrusting of the seller and seller's ability or willingness to fix stuff correctly. If at all, we just lost a deal.
Yeah.
That just
I
had
tell
to
my-
back out of one because I couldn't get my young buyers to understand that they're gonna fix this stuff. It's gonna be fine. They're gonna fix it.
And here's what I would suggest too. When you're having the constant counseling your buyer on this, to say, look, you know, you're gonna get a report, it's gonna be 40 to 70 pages. You think the house is falling down. But what you need to understand is, once we ask for these items, then we're gonna have the inspector who found these items go back and re-inspect. And we'll be ensured that these repairs have been done correctly, or we won't close.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. And I tell you, the people that don't trust the sellers. I had a call the other day from a lady, I just don't trust the sellers. I think they're lying.
Yeah. Lying and hiding.
Yeah, I'm like, yeah, you go to church. What would Jim do? Resolution period. All right, so we send over our inspection notice. Maybe we're 20 days into the contract now if we've got the 15 and the 7. And we send it over in writing. We've got everything. It's from the inspection report. They've got a copy of the inspection report. Now they have 10 days. Don't change this. You don't want to put 15 or 20 in there. Shorten the time, make them make a decision. Because your clients still want to buy a house. And so you want to make the seller say, okay, I'll fix it. And you can negotiate that back and forth. And I hate this thing they've added in here. It's on the next page. But you've got to reach a resolution within that 10 days. The resolution means it doesn't matter how many times we countered back and forth in the resolution notice, or the resolution notice response, or the second resolution notice response. We have to have 2 signatures, seller and buyer agreeing to something, or we haven't resolved this. There's been no resolution. But what it says on the next page is, in bold, capitulation. The basics of this is this. You send a notice to the seller, and the seller sends back and checks the box that says, I'm not fixing anything, and the capitulation period has started now, which is only 48 hours. What that says is either your buyer is going to buy it as is, or we're terminating the contract. This is the seller's first opportunity to terminate the contract. And there are unreasonable buyers, correct? So, you know, you just say, look, you know, you've asked for 57 items. My seller's not willing to do that. So, you know, we want out of the contract. And the buyer's saying, whoa, can we negotiate this? Well, what are you talking about? If he'll do these 3 items, we'll put it in writing and we'll see what we can get done. If not, the capitulation period started when I sent this to you. And if it goes a full 48 hours and you don't respond, which just happened with one of our agents last week, his buyers, he told them they had plenty of time and they didn't respond. Because they didn't respond, contract terminated, and the people sold it to somebody else, sold the house to somebody else. Perfectly legal. He was mad. Our agent was mad. He's like, that's not right. Sure he didn't. I mean, if you read the contract, it is, but you know, you don't have to pay any attention to that. Good?
Good.
Anything in there that you want me to go through, or?
No, I'm good.
The capitulation period, I mean, I really don't like it, but what they put that in there for was to allow the seller to get back on the market. And with the thought that sometimes buyers do make unreasonable requests, and the seller just says, look, I'm not gonna do it. I'm not gonna put a new roof on this house because The roofer said it had 5 to 7 years left, and the inspector said it looked like it was worn out. But you get a roofer, there's a difference between a roofer and an inspector, right? Or a foundation issue, you know, it's got some cracks in the foundation, and Gugliotti is looking for business, and they say, yeah, you're gonna have to fix that, it's gonna be $27,000. And you get somebody else out, and they go, all you gotta do is put some caulk in there, you know, it's got a crack, it's thin crack. So the seller goes, well, I'm not gonna do that. All right, now the contract goes faster. Municipal government inspections, we don't have any. Yay, right? You ever had a municipal government, new construction, of course you will, but you won't have any typically. The broker roll starting at 203 all the way down to 222, that basically says you have no responsibility or liability unless you say something really stupid, you know, that you think you're qualified to say, and it causes a problem, or you hire somebody, not engage. Like I call the inspector immediately. You know, when we're gonna do an inspection, I'm making the phone call. As soon as we're under contract, I'm calling, but I'm not hiring them. The inspector then will say, can I have your client's contact information? I give all the contact information. They're hiring you. I'm engaging them. So I'm not liable for anything the inspector does. The buyer would be. That's the beauty of it. I mean, look at it. They even brought that up in this trial that's going on, that there's no liability for agents, you know, under the law in Missouri. Right? The only liability again is if you hire somebody or you're the one that says, I'm an expert in roofs, and that roof is done for. And it terminates the contract, and the seller hears you say that, or finds out that you said that, and then you could have trouble. Okay? Because you don't have any knowledge or expertise other than doing what? Filling in the blanks of the contract. And you have to disclose all adverse material facts, but an adverse material fact is typically pretty obvious. For example, I've got an investor client who just is buying a house now off market. And so he called me, he said, what do you think it's worth? It's pretty big. It's over 2,000 square feet, got a detached garage and all that. But it's on the north side of town on Atlantic. And I said, well, you understand that there are railroad tracks, like 17 of them right behind the house, right? He said, yeah, but they're not in use. I said, you got that though, right? That's an adverse material fact as far as I'm concerned. I mean, that house would be 250 on the south side of town, maybe more. Up there, it's gonna be 160, you know? So, or there's a airplane, you know? I saw there's 10 acres in Greene County. I've got clients that want 10 acres in Greene County. I'm like, whoa, email, CRS tax, shit. It's at the
Like
end of the
that.
runway, you know? It's like, okay, that won't work. That's an adverse material fact. There's a junkyard in the backyard. You find out that Buc-ee's is gonna be your neighbor with 53 pumps and 17,000 lights, you know? Is that gonna be an adverse material fact? Maybe like Buc-ee's, no, but in most cases it could be. So those are the kind of things we disclose. You spot mold, I mean legitimate mold, mildew, fungus looking stuff. And you tell your client, you know, that appears to be mildew, fungus, mold, something. You know, I'm not an expert on this, you know, but I want you to make sure that you're aware of that. I mean, it's growing up the wall, you know, it's got little fuzzes on it. That's an adverse material fact. You could do that, right? I mean, you don't have to be an expert and say it's black mold. Don't say that because you don't know that for a fact. But I mean, if it's growing out of the walls, it's obvious that it's some kind of fungus, right?
We had a client with a pacemaker and looked at a house with power lines too close. Couldn't do it because it would mess up the pacemaker or something.
Yeah.
I believe
How
that.
close?
I mean, if you get close to those things, you really stand under them. You can hear those
It
babies.
was actually a transformer, and this was a brand new special kind of implant actually in her heart. That if the frequency in her heart changes, then that little thing does something. And there was some fear that the electrical transformer could trigger that thing, so.
I don't remember how close it was.
Yeah, it was maybe 80 feet from the back of the house. I mean,
Yeah,
it's pretty
I mean,
far away.
let's say you're showing that house to anybody though. I mean, I'm still gonna say, Those are major power lines. You know, I just want you to understand that you can't build anything within 100 feet of the center on either side, on those big power lines. So just be aware of that. I mean, your animals can run under, it, you can cut the grass, whatever, but you can't put a storage building under there, you know, within 100 feet of the center. And, it might affect your ability to sell in the future, because I wouldn't buy one. You know, whoever lives there bought one at one point.
I think for most people, it's just for the looks, for the cosmetic aspect of it.
Yeah, I don't think it's gonna kill you or anything unless you have what they had.
Right.
But I think at the same time, there are people too, they'll really believe that, you know, it causes brain stuff and heart stuff and whatever. I don't necessarily believe that, but if they said it did that to them, I'd be like, let's get out of here.
Yeah.
Home warranties, most of the time, we don't have home warranties on a property anymore. Man, Evan DeShong and Rick Gardner, they used to have them on 95% of their properties. They sold one on everything. HSA too used to compensate them too, which I would too, because they were selling 150 a year of those things. The deal was, it was kind of a market similar to this, maybe not the same, but similar. A house sells 1 to 3% faster with a home warranty on it, and for 1 to 3% more money. Now, HSA used to come in when they had representatives and have classes and tell people this, and if you understand that, it's like, dang, you know, I need to get a home warranty on that house, because if I had a home warranty, I'm probably gonna get more money. And of course, the HSA, you know, they haven't, the service level dropped off somewhere in there. I've asked Ochasa to come in and do the same thing, because it's true. If you can get a home warranty on a home, it does give a lot of comfort to a buyer. Here's the funny thing about home warranties is you can put one on your listing, and how much does it cost the seller?
Nothing.
Nothing. And it goes for 6 months at least, and most of the time, most of the companies, of course, you guys aren't used to anything over 6 months, but you can extend it for another 6 months. And even if there's claims against it, new water heater, new furnace or whatever, if the house doesn't sell, they don't pay for the warranty. They just pay the service call and whatever fees there are. And really think about it. So I've got a home warranty on it that covers a water heater, washer, dryer, whatever it covers. And then these issues come up in an inspection. The seller can turn to the home inspection or the warranty company and say, look, they discovered this issue. Can you fix this? And it's a lot of times it covers. I mean, think about a furnace. Depreciate it if you want to. I'd rather pay $3,500 than $7,000. You know, even if they say, well, we're gonna have to depreciate this and only pay half of it. Okay.
That's where I'm still trying to wrap my head around this. We talked about this, I think, last week at team meeting. So if I file a claim, I'm the seller, and I file a claim because the inspection found something wrong. I don't have to go ahead and buy that policy when I sell the house at closing.
No,
That's-
because it didn't close. If it doesn't close, no.
But if it does close,
Oh, if it does close, then you gotta buy the warranty, yeah.
okay, so I use the warranty, I have the warranty in place. If I don't use it, I don't pay for it. If there is a
No.
claim, then I have to pay for it, obviously.
No. Okay, so I have a warranty in place.
You're the
Ochasa.
seller?
I'm the seller.
Okay,
And I go 6 months, I don't make any claims against it, and my listing expires, the warranty goes away. I don't have to pay anything. All right, I've got it listed again, I'm Ochasa, I've got an Ochasa warranty on it, my water heater goes out. I call Ochasa, they come in and fix it, I pay the $100 fee, whatever, for the service call, but they replace the water heater. The house doesn't close, I don't have to buy the warranty. Even though I've made claims against the warranty, I don't have to buy it because it didn't close. Now, if it does close, if it closes ever, I've got to pay for the warranty.
okay, okay, got it.
But if it went on 9 months and I had all kinds of claims and it didn't close, it just goes off the market without selling, I don't have to pay anything other than what my service calls were.
Okay,
And some people hate them. They're worthless. You call them, they say, I can't fix that, it was pre-existing or whatever. You know, I think it's a coin flip. I've got an attorney though Catherine Reed, you probably know her, Hayden Coward and Bullock, you know, she's one of the partners. I sold her a house in Ravenwood South, and she's wore that damn company out, HSA. Had, you know, entire shower replaced and plumbing fixed and roof, I mean, she renews it every year.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah, and she says, don't worry, I got my money back. And they don't know she's an attorney. She just, you know, she just knows that she can use it, and she's done it.
Okay, so I keep getting the thing from city utilities about the,
No, throw it in the trash.
well, I saw the home warranty thing.
No, throw it in the trash.
They,
That's
they-
a private company soliciting you to pay insurance on your water line, your gas line from your house to the street. The chances of those things going bad are really, really slim. Like I had one bust out in the street. And I asked the guy from CU, it was, you know, it wasn't my responsibility. And I said, this happened very often. He says, every day. He said, half these pipes are 100 years old. But the one going to your house probably isn't. Even if your house is built in the 60s, it's not, well, I guess it'd be almost 100, 50 years old, 60 years old. Point is, throw it in the trash. That's just somebody trying to get you, that's a scam.
but the home
I know it
warranty
says city
would cover it,
utility.
right?
No,
Oh, it wouldn't,
your homeowner's insurance won't cover a,
not the homeowner's insurance, but a home warranty.
no, home warranty wouldn't cover that either. They don't cover stuff like that. It's very specific about what they cover. They typically cover your major appliances, maybe a leak in the roof, maybe a plumbing leak, maybe some electrical. It's really narrow. The point is, a lot of times when you sell one of these or buy one, if you're a seller, is you're trying to give the buyer comfort because they get it, once it closes, they have a warranty coverage for a year.
Right.
And they don't call you when something breaks. They call the warranty company. Yeah, but that stuff you get that says the city utilities warrant this, just throw it in the trash. I always
They don't
open it
mind.
too because it says city utilities on it, but it's not.
I have my condo in Port Royale. I had limited common area that had a pool drain for if that courtyard got full of rainwater, whatever. But State Farm didn't cover because of that particular line wasn't attached to the plumbing in my unit.
But the damage was in your unit,
Yeah,
then you should have sued the HOA.
they covered it,
No.
but that was
You have to
before
sue
they
them. So why
raised
the hell would
the
you have to pay State Farm?
deductible. I think the deductible's like 20 or 30,000 now, so it wouldn't now, but it did then.
Yeah. All right, so we go on. In this case, we're not providing one. Number two, your option is the seller agrees to buy one, but only at closing for the house. Not to exceed a certain price. You should put that in there because if you don't, then somebody's probably gonna ask for one that's $800 or $900. I think it's 605 on the CASA now. And then three, seller has a home warranty plan already in existence. And if they do, that should be in the marketing remarks or down on the MLS detail sheet. And that's just good news for your buyer is all it is. Again, it'll cover them for 12 months. All right, disposition of earnest money. Why don't we see earnest money? Because of this paragraph. Every time it references earnest money about you get your earnest money back, you get your earnest money back. If this happens, that happens. It always says per paragraph 8, which says that, you know, you can get your earnest money back if it's been deposited. However, what do you have to get your earnest money back? A mutual release of earnest money signed by both parties. Well, if you're terminating a contract with the seller and you're the buyer and you want your earnest money back, the seller's typically not like, woo-hoo, yay, we're terminating. Here, you can have your 5,000 or 1,000 or 500 or whatever. And the other way around, the buyer is terminating and the seller says, you know, no, or the seller's terminating, the buyer goes, I want my earnest money back. And the seller goes, I'm not giving it to you. Doesn't matter, you gotta have 2 signatures, right? If you don't get 2 signatures and they did have earnest money, let's say it's $1,000, it stays in escrow for up to 365 days. The brokers can make a determination of where that earnest money goes. Brokers don't, they don't do it. because then they'd have liability for making that decision. And we don't have an escrow account, so it's gotta go to the title company. So if you get a complaint from somebody that says to you, hey, you know what, why are you holding my earnest money? You say, you know, I've never touched that earnest money. The title company's got it. And you've got to follow their guidelines, which is a mutual release of earnest money signed by both parties. Which, you know what, I mean, really, it just says we're a third party in this. We're not involved, you know? But if you don't come to a resolution, guess what? It goes to the state treasurer's office on unclaimed funds. And then, you know, you get it back from the state treasurer's office. You send them a notarized letter signed by both the buyer and the seller, say, look, we've reached a resolution. We've made a decision on what to do with this earnest money. State treasurer will release that money. Guess where they release it to? Title company. Guess what you gotta have? Mutual release signed by both parties. You're right back where you were. So anyhow, we used to fight on earnest money all the time. Thank God anymore. You know, the title company is the responsibility of taking care of it. And so I just point anybody that calls me on and say, you know what? My suggestion is if you want the 1,000, they won't give it to you. Send back a new mutual release asking for 500. You know, just negotiate it. Well, can we put the property back on the market? Yeah, this is a totally different deal. Doesn't matter how much earnest money's in there. You can go back on the market and sell the house again. This is a different deal. It's under a different contract. The other contract's terminated, or you wouldn't want the earnest money back. On 9, again, we're gonna go fast here now. We have tornadoes, we have fires, don't have many earthquakes, tremors occasionally. That can destroy property, and if it does, then if that property gets destroyed, then it's under contract. The buyer has the right to terminate the contract without penalty. Or the buyer has the right to say, look, you know, I want you to fix the house. Or the buyer has the right to take a check for the amount of the property up to the terms of the contract. So you got a property under contract for 200,000, it burns to the ground. The buyer can take that check and gets the property, the deed to the property. You know, in some instances that can be good. It's a great neighborhood. This is a great lot. You know, maybe you could build the house back for 175,000. Now it's worth 350,000. But typically what happens? The buyer wants out of the contract. They want it terminated and they want the earnest money returned per paragraph 8. Paragraph 10, adjustments and closing costs. All right. I don't care what they taught you in real estate school, ignore it. You do not prorate anything, that's not your job. You don't do anything with the settlement statement, that's not your job. All you have to do is look on 279, starting at 272, pardon me, all the way down to 301, basically 2 and 3. Who determines what happens on prorations and concessions?
Lender.
The lender. Ultimately, it makes that decision. The title company will prorate what needs to be prorated, taxes, HOA fees, rents, whatever they are. And then the lender says, you got 10,000 here, I'm gonna apply 4,000 loan origination and 2,000 of this and 1,000 to the appraisal and 1,500 to that. And I'm gonna try to take all 10,000. See, ultimately the lender. Now, if there's money left over, lender has no right to say it goes to the buyer. So if they take 9,000, there's $1,000 left, then the seller gets debited 9,000 and credited 1,000. But don't think about all this stuff. I know they told you and you had to buy a calculator and all that in the school. It's stupid. I mean, the first day or second day I got into business, the third day, whatever, I wrote a contract and I was going to get somebody to help me prorate all these things. The interest rate on a mortgage. And I'm like, and the agent said, you know, that's not your job. It's not your job. You don't want to have the responsibility for that. Number 11, it's a binding contract. In other words, state of Missouri, under state law, local law, federal law, if you sign it, you say, I'm gonna do this, and it's a binding contract. The second part of that says the signability. You and I could buy a house, and let's say I'm working at Jack Henry, and Jack Henry goes, hey, we bought this company in North Dakota, we're transferring you there. We'll give you a $20,000 raise. Woo! Wait a minute, I'm under contract on a house. You're sitting beside me at Jack Henry, you go, you mean that house over on Smith Street that you went under contract on, that you showed me to? Yeah, I'll buy it. An amendment. All parties agree that the buyer is now you. And we all sign it, and that's it. As long as they stay with at least the terms and conditions of the original contract, you can assign a contract to anybody. So let's say you're driving down the street and, you know, you pull over to check your phone, and a neighbor comes out and says, hey, you a realtor? Yeah, I want to sell my house. How much you want for it? 50,000. Okay, I'll buy that. Write up the contract. You go to him and say, look, I got a deal for you. Here's a $150,000 house. I paid 50 for it. I'll sell it to you for 75. You go, deal. Simultaneous closing, it's all good. It's all perfectly legal. You can sign it to anybody. Straw buyers do this a lot. O'Reilly's, Silver Dollar City, the Hershens, Jack Stack. Anybody that's got a name that's easily recognized, Hammonds used to. You get a straw buyer to buy it because it affects your ability to negotiate, typically, if that's your last name. Boland, same thing. And then the last part, the 1031 exchange, this is typically, I buy a duplex and I pay 100,000 for it, it's a dog. I go in, doll it up a little bit, spend maybe $20,000, rents go from 500 to 1,000. 2 years later, I decide, or 3 years, doesn't matter. I decide to sell it. I paid 100, I've got 20 basically in it. I've been getting rent all this time. I decide to sell it for 300, I sell it for 300. Let's say my net on that, my basis was 100, you know, I take out the 20, I still have $180,000 in capital gains, right? Which the government wants to tax me on because I did good, which is stupid. I don't care. It's just stupid. You know, so what is that? It's 21% of 180,000. That's $37,000 right there. And I just think that's unfair. The way to avoid that is to do a 1031 exchange. It's called a stalker exchange because that's the guy who came up with it, which says, I'm going to sell this and yeah, I'm making a great profit, but I don't want to pay capital gains on it. So I'm going to put that money in a 1031 account at a local title company, escrow company. I'm never going to touch it. I don't get my hands on it. And I'm going to buy that duplex over or fourplex over there for 400,000. And I'm just going to keep doing that. That's how these guys, rich dad, poor dad. They're taking their profits from their improvements or maybe just the improvement in the market and they're buying something bigger, but they're not paying 21%. And it depends on what state you're in, but 21%. Biden, remember when he first came into office, wanted to raise capital gains to 50%. I mean, would that be horrible or what? You work your butt off, you improve your property, market gets better, and you get taxed 50%. Anyhow, they do that. They go from a single family rental, it has to be a property that can generate income, to a duplex, to a triplex, to a fourplex, to an eightplex, to whatever. You've seen lately probably on Facebook where Zach Riggs wants to spend $330,000 in 1031 exchange money up to $1 million. He's trying to avoid taxes is all he's trying to do. And who blames him? You know, what's the taxes on 330? 66 at least. You know, taxes. Now, if somebody says, I want to do a 1031 exchange, you can't do it on your personal residence. But if you have a single family residence that you're using as a rental, you could do a 1031 exchange on that to something else. And when it says like, it's called a like kind exchange. It don't have to be a single family for a single family or a duplex for a duplex. It could be a single family rental home for a restaurant or a farm or Cox Dent Service for O'Reilly Automotive, you know, whatever it might be. You could do that and don't let anybody ever convince you that it's got to be like kind, meaning the same thing. It just has to be able to make money. So we sold a restaurant in Branson and bought a farm. hell, I'd never raised a cow in my life and, you know. But we were gonna cut hay, if we were gonna raise cows. Never made it to the property, but point is, I didn't have to pay what would have been a significant amount of taxes on the sale. So that's what an exchange is. Now, if anybody ever says that to you, it sounds difficult. Go online, look, you get a summary of it, and then call Hogan or whatever title company you use and ask them if they do a 1031 exchange. If they say yes, it's in the contract already. If you want to expand on it in special agreements, you can say all parties agree that the buyer is doing a 1031 exchange at no additional cost to the seller. That's all you got to put in there. And then you take it to the title company and say, look, 1031 exchange. And they'll give it in Hogan, I think they give it to Holly Boss.
Or Mary.
Or Mary. Well, Mary's gone, though, is she? I thought she retired.
No. Bud's wife, Mary?
Oh, that's true. That's true.
Yeah. I don't know, doesn't matter.
Yeah,
She handled the last one I did.
yeah. But you've got to have, here's a key to 1031 exchange, and you're probably not ever gonna do it. But you gotta have somebody qualified, because if they screw it up, then somebody's gonna get sued. Is this obvious or not? The attorneys say on page, whatever, I'm on 512, paragraph 12, entire agreement in modification. The entire agreement, that's, the attorneys say it's the four corners of the 8-page contract, but that's crap. If you ever get sued, they want everything. So if it's got an initial or a signature on it, or if you've included it like an MLS detail sheet, that's a part of the contract. Because that's what they're gonna ask you for you if you ever get into litigation. Okay? Even if it doesn't say that it's an attachment, which is what this says, if it's there in the contract somewhere, it's a part of the contract. Disclosures included. On 13, I know you don't ever want to talk to this to your clients, but you're crazy if you don't. I always tell my clients, I want you to read this and I want you to understand it. Here's the problem if you default. My client goes, oh, I'm not going to default. Well, I just want you to understand it, Mr. Buyer. If you default, the seller, if it's not legal, the seller can sue you for specific performance, which means they can make you buy the house. And it's real, it's happened. Or they can sell you for any damages they incur. So let's say we go under contract, we're 20 or 35 days into contract, they've got a moving truck, they've moved to Alaska, it's cost them $25,000 and you decide to default, they can sue you for those damages. And they can, you know, as long as it's legitimate and they can measure it, they can sue you for sure. But the first thing I would do if it was me, if I was a seller and the buyer defaulted on me, I'm going to a psychologist. I am. And I'm gonna get session set up, therapy. I'm serious. And I'm gonna say, you know, this has really damaged me, you know, I've been crushed. I've never been hurt like this in my life. I'm gonna set up like 25 sessions.
Jim's a funny guy.
Because that then would be a damage that could be recovered.
Yep. He's been in the game for over 30 years and he knows everything there is to know.
They're not on mute. We can hear you.
All right. Anyhow, then the third option is any remedy under the law. And these paragraphs are duplicates of each other. So if the buyer defaults in any way, then they could, any remedy under the law. So you go to the attorney and say, you know, if you can dig it up, call me and let's get it. The other side, if the seller does it, same thing. Seller defaults, says, look, you know, I'm not closing with these people. I think they're crazy. That's not a legal reason. So you have to have a legal reason not to close if you're going to not close. And if you don't have a legal reason, then you could be in default. Could be. I mean, that's the key word because the first thing you should do is take it to a good attorney. Catherine Reed, the Creason girl that came in here from whatever firm that is. And you say, look, here's what happened. And they'll go, yeah, you've got legitimate cause. Or you don't have cause. I'm sorry. I just think, you know, you don't have a good attorney will say that. There's other attorneys you can go to and say, oh yeah, you've got cause, you know. $5,000 retainer, and let's get started. So be very clear with them that they really need to understand that. I always tell my buyers this. Now, if you get to the end here and you decide you're not gonna buy it, I'm cautioning you, I want you to be aware of that. I would suggest this, okay, we're already at the end of the contract. We've had inspections, repairs have been made. You know, your loan's approved. You don't have any legal means to get out of this. You go ahead and close. I don't care if you ever move into it, and I'll put it on the market. The minute the papers are signed, the funds are delivered for 3% more than what it's, you know, you're buying it for. Because we've got all these repairs done, the market's improved, hopefully. And I'll sell it for you and I won't charge you anything on the list side, nothing. Keller Williams will allow you to do that. Now, if a buyer's agent brings somebody, you may have to pay commission on that side. Well, what kind of commission? Well, typically, or, you know, what I normally charge if I'm a listing agent would be 6%, so I'd say it'd be 3%. You understand that? I mean, I want you to think about it before you make a decision to default. I mean, my suggestion would be go ahead and close. And I'll guarantee this to you. Even if you win down the road somewhere, this will be less expensive.
Yeah.
They go, well, not if I win. Yeah, but think about it. It's going to take the last one I went through was 18 months. So it's going to take 12 to 18 months to settle this. You're going to be out money up front. You're going to be out time. And think of the emotional wear and tear this causes on you having a lawsuit going on. You're better off closing. Let me sell it. I'll sell it for you. I'll get open houses every Sunday, whatever, so you don't have to default. It's a better option for you, I guarantee it. It's your decision, but you let me know. That's what I tell them every time. And it typically, and a couple of times it's worked. But think about it. The sellers put a new roof on the house. You already negotiated the price down. You've got all the repairs made in addition to a new roof. I'm gonna try to get 3% more where it doesn't cost them anything, you know, really. It'd be a better option. It says the prevailing party gets paid. In Missouri, I can tell you, you can call any attorney that tell you that doesn't always happen. You're entitled to it, recover your fees, but you don't always do that. In our office, one of our agents, their seller defaulted. Been 18 months ago or so. And the buyer said, heck with that, I want to buy the house, and sued them. And somewhere between 12 and 18 months, they won. And the seller had to sell the house and move out. The seller, I guess, I don't know what the deal was exactly, but it was one of our agents that represented the seller. I still remember him calling me and saying, you know, they're gonna default, or, you know, I think it's default. So the buyers swear they're gonna sue him, you know. I said, well, keep me informed. And he did. And sure as hell, the buyers won, and I had never seen that before, but they forced the seller to move out of their house down in Christian County, Ozark, or next to one or the other. All right, on seller's disclosure, look, even if they don't make any disclosures and you're the listing agent, put the disclosure online, put it on there. I don't care if they don't put anything on there other than their name and sign it. Because if you look at B, seller agrees to provide buyer with the seller's disclosure statement within 24 hours, basically one day. And then buyer has 3 days to review it. If they don't like something on it, they can terminate the contract. Now, how would you like to be the listing agent in that case? You know, where you've got a full price offer or $500,000 offer on a property, and then you didn't put the disclosure statement up, and they ask you to send them one, you send them one because you don't have it up, but you do have it. And then they look at it and go, oh, we're terminating the contract. Oh, God. You're talking about a fiduciary responsibility going bad there. And I have been guilty of this. I'll have it sitting on my desk and not have it scanned in. And it's just like, oh my, what am I doing? What am I thinking? I mean, I wish the MLS would say, you know, now where they've got the lead-based paint, you can't put a listing up. If it's got lead-based paint, you gotta have the disclosure in there. I wish they'd do that on the disclosures because that would be the worst thing ever. All right, then C says no seller's disclosure statement. Seller's disclosure statements in Missouri are not mandatory. They're suggested, but not mandatory. So if you don't have one, you don't have one. And the last broker meeting went to, an agent asks, or when the brokers ask, well, you know, I've got sellers that won't sign those 4 statutory required ones. So, well, they don't really have to. What do you mean? They're required by law, but he said they didn't have to. What I've asked him to do is to put a signature right under that box. So I can sign these 4 disclosures, but I'm not gonna make any disclosures on the rest of it. I'll sign the ones that the law makes me sign, but I don't wanna sign the rest of it. Not really that big a deal, because you just go to the next page and check. I'm not making any further disclosures, but it would make sense to me to put a signature box there and then say, I'm not making any further disclosures. Lead-based paint, you've gotta have it. Walkthroughs, utilities have to be on for walkthroughs. Don't let anybody tell you anything different. We don't have many REO properties now, but per this contract, they have to be on. On 18 on signatures, it can be in multiple counterparts. If you read it all the way through, basically you can do electronically, wet, fax, any way, stamped, kind of maybe, but you can do different formats. So you could sign electronically, your wife could sign wet, and then we go and have a counter and she can sign wet and you can sign electronically. It just doesn't matter. On governing law and construction, we're seeing this all the time. Now, you probably have already seen it too. Baby boomers are dying, right? And their kids inherit the house, and there's 2 daughters and 2 sons, and they're married. How many people have to sign the contract? Yeah, 8. The husbands and wives too, in Missouri. So you got the 2 daughters and 2, let's say it's 4 daughters, so you got 4 daughters and they're married.
Yeah.
8 people have to sign. And Steve Shelley had one of these, he's got 10. He called me, he said, do I have to have all 10 of them sign the disclosures? Yeah. How about the measurement? Yeah. I said, here's what I would do if I were you. I'd get the extra signature page and get them all to sign it and just copy it and put it in the documents rather than send it to them, whatever number of times that would be, 7 or 8. But seller can refer to 1 person or 10, buyer can refer to 1 person or 10. On notices, really important on the next page, any notice, consent, approval, request, waiver, objection, or other communication required under this contract after its acceptance to be delivered to seller shall be in writing, shall be deemed delivered to seller upon delivery thereof to the broker. All right, so what that says is this. If I'm going to give notice to you, for example, so you make an offer, I send you a counter, and you say, hey, it looks good. I'll get them to sign it tonight. And so you do get them to sign it physically. You know, you see them at church. And then you go out to dinner. And then the next morning you go to your kid's soccer game. And then you go to your mom, have lunch the next day. And then at 2 o'clock, you think, I got to send that counter back over. And you send it over, and the agent calls you and goes, hey, we accepted another offer. And you go, wait a minute, I told you, my clients were going to sign it. They accepted it. You know, isn't my word good? No, it has to be delivered. And as soon as you stick it in an email, or worst case scenario, you shoot a picture of it and send it in a text or an email, you know, with your phone, now it's delivered. As soon as it sends, unless it comes back to you, it's delivered. And so you're covered then. And we've had that happen too. And the other brokerages, some of the small brokerages said, that's unethical. We told you we signed that. You knew that we signed it. But the seller doesn't know, right? Because he has no knowledge of it because it doesn't exist unless it's in writing. It happens all the time. All right, on this one, on 21, here's all the writers, but these aren't all of them. You know, there's 155 different documents in MR. But we talked about the government loan writer. If it's any kind of government loan, you've got to attach it. They've done a sight unseen writer. I'll explain that in a minute. And then they don't have any other contingencies. On their sight unseen writer, they were buying it from out of state at this price. And then they got here within 72 hours, whatever it was, and looked at it and said, oh, we don't like it. And they're gone. I mean, we still sold it to the next person for the same price with less concessions. But I told my clients, I said, you know, what do you think? I said, well, you know, that price is fine with us. I said, what about the sight unseen writer? Well, it's only 72 hours. I said, okay. I'm gonna call the agent, it was one of our agents, said, I'm not putting this thing pending until you go see it. And so I never did, it never went off the market. Note on 398, contracts designed for use in connection with completed construction. This thing doesn't work very well with new construction, except to establish the price, okay? Because most of the builders, trendsetters, Cronkite, Aller, they've all got their own contracts. So what you do is establish a price, and then the special agreements, what I would write if I were you is buyer, and unless you've already had a conversation with the new construction agent, he said, you've got to have this attachment. Buyer and seller / builder to meet within X amount of time to choose all finishes, both interior or exterior, regarding the home. Because let's say it's just framed. I mean, look, how many checks do we have here? You got everything, paint, siding, windows. I mean, I go on and on, but you can't put it in a contract like this, so you really need their document. The other thing I would suggest, if you're working with a smaller builder and he doesn't have a checklist, you create it, the checklist, Pella windows with black frames.
Lord.
Yeah. You know what I mean? You'd have to though.
Yeah, gosh.
If you don't, guess what? There's guys like, no, I can't say that on camera. There are people that, you want the island to be horizontal and all of a sudden it's vertical. And it happens. And then builders just go,
Wasn't in the contract.
yeah, wasn't in the contract, We never signed anything about that. I mean, those are what they come about now with the showers that everybody are building. I want this tile. And you go in the house and it's got black tile and you wanted light tile. What do? Well, if you haven't selected it, you can't take it out. I mean, you could take it out, but they'll charge you $7,000 there. So meet within a certain time frame to select everything. All right, if you are buying it for yourself, and all of us have bought a house so far probably, or you're gonna sell one that's yours, you have to identify that. You have got to let everybody know that you have a personal interest in the property, whatever it is. I go all the way down to ex-brother-in-laws on this one. Because they are family members or were at one time. Sources of brokers' compensation. Right now, for sure, the seller's paying the compensation. We see it on the MLS sheet. That's one of the advantages we have in our community. But if you're collecting a buyer's fee, then that has to be marked also. The MREC wants to see that because they're going to look on the closing statement and see that the buyer compensated $250 or whatever. They want to know that you marked that in the contract and that you told everybody that up front. So you're not only getting compensation from the seller, you're getting compensation from the buyer. On the brokerage relationship, people screw this up all the time. In this case, Dusty Capone from Keller Williams is assisting the buyer. The buyer's limited agent, he's also a designated agent. And that's actually correct. In reality, since he wrote this with, it's Chris, never mind. But if he wrote it with me, if I was the agent, he'd be a dual agent automatically, just like that. But since it's with Chris, my wife, since I don't ever sell anything, then it's not dual agency. But you can see on the other side, licensee assisting seller is a seller's limited agent and a designated agent. You'll always be a designated agent at Keller Williams. Unless you're the listing agent, somebody walks into your open house and says, I want to buy this house. You go, that's great. That's fantastic. You want to write it up right now? Yeah. You understand I represent the seller. That's okay, man. I just want to buy the house. It doesn't say who's representing the buyer. It says who's assisting the buyer. So in that case, you would be a seller's limited agent. You wouldn't be a designated agent, but you'd still be working for the seller, right? But you're assisting the buyer with the contract and the documents. You're probably not going to do anything different. The hardest part about being in that position, whether you're a dual agent or you're assisting the buyer and representing the seller, is when the buyer makes the offer. Because they almost always ask, what do you think I should offer? Say, well, you know what, I represent the seller, so I really can't say that. Well, you don't have any idea? Well, I can give you a CMA if you like, but I wouldn't really be able to break it down for you because I represent the seller. Sometimes why a buyer should have a representation, right? They go, that's all right, man. You know, I think the house is worth every penny of it. Great. But you know, you have to remember that fiduciary role that you have with the seller because you're under contract with them. You're not under contract with this buyer who just walked into your open house or called you on a sign call. Okay?
You're just delivering the offer. And that's what I have told my,
Yeah.
when that happens in the past, just say, I can't tell you what they're thinking. I can't tell you really anything, but you tell me what to offer, I'll offer it, and then we'll both know.
Yeah.
Was that high enough? Is it too high? Is it not?
Yeah. And then once that's done, once you get under contract, I don't change my role at all after that. I mean, I'm helping the buyer do whatever the buyer needs to do.
Mhm.
I'm not, I can't counsel them on financial issues or tax issues anyway. I'm just trying to get them to the finish line.
You still haven't signed the agency?
No, you don't sign it. Because you really, I mean, think about it, sign call or an open house. You don't know that person from Adam and Eve. I mean, maybe you go to church with them, but you really don't, you don't have a relationship. You haven't established that. You haven't talked about financial situations or anything like that. So you don't have an agency relationship. In Missouri, you're assumed to be a transaction broker or agent before you are anything else until you establish something. Even when you're out driving around showing these buyers houses, you don't have a buyer's agency. You're either a transaction agent or you're representing the seller. I bet they'd like to know that, wouldn't they? Who do you represent? I thought you were representing, not without a contract, right? That's what the Missouri Broker Disclosure Form says. If you want representation in the state of Missouri, you have to have a signed contract. Paragraph 3, first line, underline it for them, makes it easier to get the buyer's agency signed. If you want representation, see right here what the state of Missouri says, you've got to sign a contract. All right, then we have Keller Williams Realty as a broker firms. We have the state license number. I fill all this in that I can fill in when I'm making an offer. Like if I was writing this offer and Chris was the one that had it listed, I'd put her license number in there. I'll put her state permit. I want everything in there except for her signature because I don't want to get to compliance 45 days from now and have to call her and say, hey, you don't have that signed, or don't have the broker's license number in there. And then on the last page, page 8 of 8, we are a franchise. 27, we gather this sales information unless we sign something in writing that says we don't want to disclose, and we send it to the MLS so that we can establish market value. Just like right now, I've noticed, and you may have too, that square footage cost is coming down a little bit on some of these resale houses. I mean, it's not dropping like a rock. Where it used to be 100 was pretty high. Nothing was high last couple of years. And now all of a sudden I see a lot of these houses are coming in at 140 a square foot and 138, things like that. I'm like, okay, we're going back to semi-normal at least in some of it. So, but that's why we do it. We're trying to establish that. And then the next time we list a house, we've got this market data to tell these people over here, you may think it's worth 300, but everything else that's sold like yours is worth 200. FIRPTA and anti-terrorism. It's kind of like the concessions deal. It's in your job. This is the title company's job. Don't you ever try to determine whether somebody is a foreign person or a terrorist. That's not your job. I don't care what you think. I guess I do care, but don't do it. Just give it to the title company, let them take care of it. Acceptance deadline. I think you should give as little time as possible for a response. So if they saw the house on 8/6/8/15, which they did at 3:24 p.m., they only gave us 18 hours to respond. It's vacant, but if I'm going to do that, I'm going to call the agent and say, how long is it going to take for you to get a response from your seller? Because I don't want to, leave this hanging out there for 2 or 3 days. We're going to see other properties. But I think 24 hours is a long time. But if I go show a house at 9 o'clock in the morning and the seller has to get out of the house, you know what I mean, pack up everybody and leave, and they got a sign in the yard, I might make it for 9 o'clock that night if I write an offer. Because buyer wants to buy, seller wants to sell, they got a sign in the yard. Why should I wait another 12 or 18 hours?
Right.
But if it's an REO property, foreclosure, forget it. You can put whatever you want to in there, they aren't gonna pay attention to it. Same thing with most entities, they're not gonna pay any attention to it. All right, and then, time is of the essence. Everything's in 24-hour calendars, so if I write a contract today, which is the 14th, and I've got 10 days for my inspections, day one is the 15th. I mean, it might be 36-hour day, really, when it comes to it, but that's day one, okay? And then I go to midnight on the 10th day, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, midnight. Those are, it's not business days. It used to be business days. So you count until Friday and then you skip Saturday and Sunday, but now it's just 24-hour periods. But the time is of the essence thing's all on you, right? It's on your client, but it's on you because that's part of your job. That's one of the biggest parts of your job is, you know what? Damn earnest money deposited, you know, if we're gonna hold this thing together. Have you ordered the inspections yet? I thought you were doing that. Okay, I'm doing it, you know, but you've got to get all these things done and you got to get them done in a timely manner. You've got to have already had conversations with the lender. You should have a conversation with the title company. That's like why I like working with title companies I know that are going to keep me informed all the time. Meridian's actually really good about that. I mean, they'll send you email after email, which is fine. I just want to know what's going on. I don't want any surprises. You don't either. And then 471, see that one, check box if additional signatures are needed and attach the additional signature page. You're gonna need it if you're gonna stay in the business for the next 5 to 10 years, because a lot of people die and they've given their stuff to their kids. And then the seller accepts the offer, the buyers are on the left, the seller's on the right, and Bessie accepted this one. Unfortunately, when they saw it, they decided, no, we're done. We're done. And that only took 2 hours and 27 minutes. That's pretty good, actually.
That's very good.
Yeah. That's good stuff. Stop the recording.
Good to refresh all that.
Absolutely.
Well, I'm glad you guys stopped there. I really am. Because then you can go back and say, here's what Jim said.
Well,
That's always a good thing. You know, I found out a couple of different times in 23 that I've been wrong on issues, you know? But if I am, I'll call you and say, hey, I was wrong on that.
well, it's easy to overlook stuff.
And there's good ways to explain it to
yeah.
people, and there's better ways. And the better we get at explaining all of this to our clients, the better.
Appreciate it.
The more effective way.
Yeah, the better.
I agree totally. The best thing that you can do is have enough knowledge